Within the segmentum obscurus to the galactic northwest lies the most prolific warp storm that history has ever seen within the Milky Way. In High Gothic, it is known as the Ocularis Terribus, but to the layman, it bears a name that strikes fear into all that hear it. It is a permanent scar on the universe, the grotesque afterbirth of Slaanesh, she who thirsts, after the fall of the mighty Eldari Empire. Known to the humans of the early Great Crusade as Cygnus X1, the warp storm has burned into the mind of a young Perturabo, Primarch of the Iron Warriors, on his homeworld of Olympia. There he stared back at the dancing colors of space, where he gave it the accursed name all of humanity would come to know it as, the Eye of Terror. When the Horus Heresy concluded and humanity hunted down the traitor legions in the Great Scouring, the Loyalist forces successfully pushed the traitors into the Eye of Terror, who sought refuge in its chaotic energies. With the insides constantly fluctuating between dimensions and the chaos-worshipping legionnaires safe within, it became the base of operations for many different warbands, essentially becoming the abhorrent whole of the Immaterium's kiddie pool that the forces of chaos kind of leak out of to cause a ruckus. Many attempts were made to bring the fight to Chaos's doorstep, such as the Abyssal Crusade, which I've done a video on already. However, those crusades were ill-fated, with many of them failing, or in the case of the Abyssal Crusade, backfiring horribly as the crusading Astartes drank the Kool-Aid and began raiding the Imperium. But in their defense, it was a little bit of a sabotage. I covered that. With many attempts for counter-offenses dead in the water, the Imperium dedicated more efforts for a defensive line around the Eye of Terror. The fortress world of Cadia was the first line of defense against anything that slithered out of the Eye. While the Imperium had indeed fortified the ever-living shit out of Cadia, its defensive capabilities were augmented by the Cadian pylons, mysterious, like Washington Memorial-looking things made of blackstone by unknown Xenos in ancient times. Thousands of these formed a web over the surface of Cadia and emanated an anti-psychic field that stabilized the energies of the warp around Cadia's orbit, making the Cadian Gate the most stable area around the Eye of Terror. After the 13th Black Crusade, which saw Cadia, crack like an egg, it was revealed that the pylons were actually of Necron origin, spires made of a substance called Noctilith, as defensive structures in their war against the old ones. Even with the incomprehensible fortification of Cadia, and all the good that did for them, the threat of the Eye of Terror was simply too much, and so the Imperium summoned the forces of 20 Space Marine chapters to hold permanent vigil over the Eye of Terror and the space surrounding it. This brotherhood of warriors were given the titles of Astartes Praeses, their names inscribed into the subject of today's video, the Mythos Angelica Mortis. The Mythos Angelica Mortis and Astartes Praeses both have real-world roots to their names, par for the course for Games Workshop's High Gothic imaginary language. In this case, Mythos is Greek, the root word meaning mythology. Angelica is a feminine Latin name meaning angel, which in itself could be messenger of God. Finally, the word mortis comes from Latin as well, meaning death, or sometimes has a verbal connotation to it, meaning to die or to kill. Granted, I'm not a wordsologist or anything, but it's a pretty easy two-piece puzzle to see that Mythos Angelica Mortis translates to mythology of the angels of death in the context of Warhammer 40k. Even the title of Astartes Praeses is a pretty easy dissection as well. Praeses were the title of provincial governors of a province in the Roman Empire. The word means protector or guardian, making these quite literally guardian Astartes. This concludes the Lich's Lab's basic language course. The Mythos Angelica Mortis had initially held the names of the 20 Astartes Praeses at its inception. However, as things go in the 41st millennia, chunks of that list were lost to time. And you'll see here in just a second that even the portions of the list that do remain have some complications. According to the 3rd edition Eye of Terror Codex, one chapter had been destroyed in its entirety, and 2 chapters had been declared excommunicate traitores. The fancy word for call your mom to pick you up, you're not invited to my sleepovers anymore. On the list of 15 known Astartes Praeses, including the excommunicated ones by the way, 4 of them have no artwork or any kind of listed heraldry or uniform whatsoever. This leaves us with this breakdown here. 11 known chapters with a reference, 4 known chapters with no reference, and 5 chapters that are completely lost to time. And in this video, I'm going to make a mini for each and every one of them. Before I qualified to monetize my channel, I mainly used Ko-fi to accept support and donations from my viewers. There I had a donation goal set for this very video that was technically never met, but it was so close that I decided to close the gap with my own wallet and just call it a success, making it time to fulfill my end of that bargain. But how does one complete an unfinished document? Well, let me give you an overview on what's going on here today. For each chapter, I'll be touching on a little bit of their lore while converting them to our video standard of a sergeant, a visual guide fancy enough to gussy up in HQ or strip down to just basic soldiers. I'll be using various Primaris models for this, as that's just happen what I have in my inventory, and I feel like that's what most people have access to these days anyways. You could also see it as Primaris reinforcements for dying chapters, but obviously feel free to use any firstborn models you have instead. Like I said, I'm just using what I have in my box. For this video, I'll start with the 11 chapters that we have a lore or visual representation of, those being the most straightforward. From there, we'll enter missing content territory, where I'll try my best to give my interpretation of what these Marines could have looked like before their records were either damaged or scrubbed. And finally, I'll be homebrewing 5 original chapters to finish the entirety of the roster, including the one chapter that was destroyed entirely. While this is obviously my own content that I am inserting to fill the blanks, Games Workshop seems pretty content to leave the roster incomplete, which is 100% totally fine and on brand. This is just my attempt to fill the gaps in this piece of lore that seems to have been generally forgotten about, or not really had any focus in the first place. I've done extensive research and work into making these original chapters interesting and hopefully look like seamless additions to the roster, so hopefully you guys will like them. Every chapter, including the original ones, will have a link to a 3D printable pauldron in the description to make starting your own army down the line a lot easier. And while this video is very, very, very long, don't feel like you have to watch it in one sitting. Please, for the love of God, don't sit it and watch it in one sitting. I've set up chapters for you to easily navigate around the video in your own time. If you need to leave a comment with a timestamp, you can come back to it and finish it. You know, just don't, I know what you got. Don't sit there and just watch the whole damn thing, okay? I mean, I appreciate it, but like, you take care of yourself, please. I know that I've been rambling for a long time before the video even starts, but let me say one last thing before we kick it off. This video took a tremendous amount of time and attention and labor to accomplish, and I wouldn't have nowhere near the determination to do such a project without my amazing community. If you like the video, please consider subscribing. If you'd like to support the channel, consider a super thanks or supporting me on Patreon or something. My patrons get backstage access to what I'm working on all the time, regular workbench updates, and access to polls and giveaways. But having you guys' support for projects like this makes the endeavor worthwhile. Even though my list of patrons is quite small at the moment, I'd like to go ahead and read off a list of them as thanks real quick. Minced Meat, BW Terrain and Forge, Mr. Clint Diggler, News or Nuz? I'm not really sure which one it is. I've been saying Nuz. Jacob Linhart, William Pothier, and last of all, Ben Gisby. None of this required. My content itself will always be free for you guys, but having you guys to support makes Titanic projects like this not only possible, but worthwhile. And I really can't express how thankful I am to you guys. But without further ado, I'm not going to keep you guys much longer. Let's get into the Mythos Angelica Mortis.
Look, I've got like 3 bullets left. Could you please just stay close and we'll be out of here soon.
Okay.
President isn't paying me enough for this kind of crap, I swear.
Are you? What the fuck?
The Angels Eradicant are a chapter with little history within the Imperial records. At some indistinct time, the Angels Eradicant partnered with another chapter, the Astral Fists, and sent small parties of Astartes, party Astartes, I suppose, out to respond to a distress call on the planet Vitrium Mundi, homeworld of a chapter called the Marines Mordant. The Marines Mordant had recently lost 2 companies of troops against High Fleet Leviathan, leaving them vulnerable to an ambush from everyone's favorite double agents, Alpha Legionnaires. Sadly, by the time the Alpha... not the Alpha's Eradicant, what the hell? Sadly, by the time the Angels Eradicant and Astral Fist arrived to the planet, the chapter had fallen to the assault, the Marines Mordant effectively becoming extinct with no known surviving members. However, when it comes to the Angels Eradicant, what is well known could be widely considered their darkest hour. The Angels Eradicant were active during Abaddon's 13 Black Crusade and found themselves in the planet Salandraxxus after escorting the living Saint Lozapath back to the Shrine World. Unfortunately for them, on the way out, they were ambushed by Richard Karn, the Betrayer himself.
I don't think so, Tim.
Who had locked eyes on Lozapath's premium holographic ghost rare skull, first edition Knuckles. Given that the Angels Eradicant had already gained the ire of Khorne for their defensive role against the Khornate Collar Cost Blood Crusade, yes, Collar Cost, which I imagine is indeed a cholera holocaust, the bad blood between the Astartes and Legionnaires saw to a quick outbreak of skirmishing across the planet's surface. The Angels Eradicant teamed up with the local guard and the Battle Sisters of the Order of the Divine Perfection against Karn's World Eaters, who were reinforced by Black Legion's specialized Khornate division, the Hounds of Abaddon. Sadly, the Angels Eradicant and the Imperial garrison of Salandraxxus were overpowered, the chapter slain to a man, and Lozapath's skull becoming Karn's newest offering to the Lord of Skulls. Knowing what we know about the Angels of Eradicant, they don't really have an established aesthetic, so I'm not going to go too crazy with random additions for my first model here. For the weaponry, I'll be giving him this hand flamer and a power sword, both considered pretty handy weapons when being charged at by 9 Gorillion roided up World Eaters. However, I didn't have a good power sword laying around. As many random bits as I have sitting around, I don't actually have a lot of power swords, which is kind of weird now that I think about it. So I stole this Grey Knight sword. Yeah, I know it's not exactly a standard issue Space Marine power sword, but hey, we've painted like 9 million fucking chain swords on this channel, so just work with me, okay? Now, with the very simple conversion done, I want to talk about the order of events for their lore while I'm painting this, which is pretty important to the overall identity for the chapter. The event with the World Eaters was called the Slaughter of Salandraxxus, and it's not quite sure where it falls chronologically. If the Slaughter of Salandraxxus occurred before the Marines Mordant incident, then obviously at least some crumb of the Angels Eradicant survived, maybe by sheer luck of not being on escort duty into a blender. But if Salandraxxus occurred after the Marines Mordant incident, there's a high chance that the chapter is close to extinction, if not already entirely dead. While one could argue that 1 or 2 survivors may have been scooped up into Deathwatch duty or something, as Astartes survivors tend to do, the Mythos Angelica Mortis does specifically state that 1 chapter had been destroyed, maybe even eradicated. Oh fuck, title drop. While the Angels Eradicant are probably the strongest candidates for this extinction distinction, I chose to interpret it as the chapter having survivors after the Slaughter of Salandraxxus, meaning they may still be operating around the Eye of Terror in a supportive capacity to some extent. Basically, this means that the chapter that has gone extinct was one of the unlisted chapters that I'm going to homebrew in later. In this project, I chose to prioritize the official established content over my own, which is usually the case overall, unless the official source is dumb, and I choose to ignore it, so actually forget that last sentence entirely, I guess. And here we have the finished Angels Eradicant, getting ready to cut down any World Eaters that might try to charge him. As you can see, I went with a fairly simple marble base with a gold spacer that separates out into some stone, which I felt like for this model being mostly bone and black, I feel really matches the kind of color neutralness, which makes the red and the blue pop a little more. While it's a little hard to see on my camera, the bone was highlighted with pure white, dry brushing, but the wash that I used tinted it back down into a little more of a tan. And that wash went over everything, including the black. I've gone over how to paint black a million times on this channel so far, but as a quick refresher, base coat with a dark gray, dry brush with a gray, extreme highlights with a light gray, and then when you wash it all down, it should all blend in together. I also did just notice that the right pauldron, I've used some gloss varnish on to put a decal on, and now that I think about it, yeah, I forgot to varnish all of these minis. So if you happen to see some shiny soldier shoulders, ooh, just keep that in mind. Overall, though, I really do like the Angels Eradicant. I really love their paint job, which, now that I think about it, is eerily similar to the Blackguard that I covered in the Tyrannic War video, which I also fell in love with. I dare say they're almost the same. I think I might have a type when it comes to paint jobs.
Alright, listen to me, you knife-eared piece of shit. If you go any further with your piss-stained pubic hair you call a wig, I'm gonna wreck your shit so hard that you won't even be able to walk with your limp dick. I'm gonna shove my foot so far up your...
The Black Consuls are known as some of the most adamant followers of the Codex Astartes within the Ultramarine successors. They operate in a bunch of small task force over a very wide area to contribute to a number of operations, leading to many of their recorded deployments occurring simultaneously. Originally a fleet-based chapter operating out of the Noctis Obscurum, the Black Consuls came under attack by Dark Eldar that saw their flagship utterly destroyed. This planted a seed of recreational xenophobia that the chapter gently nourishes on a daily basis with hatred and, well, more hatred.
Son of a bitch.
After relocating to the planet Cyclopia, the Black Consuls composed themselves and partook in a casual 300-year Dark Eldar extinction campaign across 15 star systems. Their revenge so utterly concentrated that they somehow, don't ask me how, managed to collapse an entire dimension within the webway. I could not figure out how one would actually do that, but I assume they did that simply to kill as many Dark Eldar as possible, and I truly respect the lengths they will go to kill their sworn enemy. Like, bravo. Bravo, people. The hardships didn't end for them there, though. During the siege of Godeth Hive, the Iron Warriors rustled the planet's nuclear who-whatsits, causing the vaporization of an entire continent where many of the Black Consuls were operating. While the chapter would have no doubt survived due to their scattered nature, it was still a major blow to their population. The Black Consuls were operating in the Jericho Reach, both in the Achilles Crusade, which I also did a video on if you hadn't seen it by the way, and in Deathwatch service. While the news did reach the Astartes operating in the area, the fickleness of warp comms meant the message was broken and scrambled.
What the fuck?
Upon receiving that news, the Black Consuls gathered all of their battle brothers in an area to plan what their next move was going to be. It was decided that they send a single Marine and he would go investigate what happened and bring back the truth. That was 250 years ago, and many fear the truth would never be revealed to them, but when you send a single guy, I imagine the failure rate is, pretty damn high. Like, do you know what setting you're driving through? Really? While the chapter was eventually reinforced with Primaris Marines, the Black Consuls seem to be fated to a lost history, although they have had some luck in the past. One day at the Deathwatch HQ, a single Marine named Hale showed up, claiming to have knowledge of where the Black Consuls' missing 4th company disappeared to. Insert your choice of either Hail Mary or All Hail Now jokes here. Hale was given a Deathwatch kill team as an escort to a space hulk where, after partaking in the prerequisite shooting big bad ghoulies down metal corridors, the kill team was able to recover the remains of the entire 4th company, as well as their relics and war gear over a period of time. The Black Consuls were indebted to Hale and the Deathwatch, renewing their vows of service and pledging to triple the number of battle brothers sent to serve the Deathwatch from that day forward. While the Black Consuls are probably tied for the most lore around the Astartes Praeses chapter, I really could go on and on about them since they've just done so many interesting things, but I actually have to get on with the video at some point, so I'm not going to get too in-depth on them. For now, I'm just going to move on to converting the mini, and the major thing I wanted to do was make sure I denote their commitment to the Deathwatch service. For the base of the mini, I used this mostly vanilla Assault Intercessor, as Black Consuls are mostly known for their Steel Rain tactics with drop pods, so I imagine this Marine bursting out of a recently crashed drop pod to chop up his enemies. In general though, I just really like this charging pose, and as I was sitting there tinkering with it, how to make it a little better, I just thought, you know, I like it as is, so I don't really need to change much about it. According to the 6th edition Space Marine Codex, when a Marine's tour of service in the Deathwatch ends, they are allowed to keep their Deathwatch pauldron and optionally wear it on the right shoulder while serving in their parent chapter again. This is a great way to show the Black Consul's strong ties to the Deathwatch at a glance. I'm not sure how likely a sergeant would be selected for Deathwatch duty and come back and generally keep his rank. I figured they would be more tempted to take a veteran, but you know, fuck it. Maybe he's just that good. I don't know. Honestly, I didn't think about it until like 10 minutes ago, so yeah, we're just gonna roll with it. The paint job here is pretty simple and pretty familiar if you've seen any of my other obscure lore videos. I know I lightly touched on it in the Angels Eradicant section we just had, but let me buckle down and give you a better explanation of what I'm doing here. After painting the mini a dark gray, I used progressively lighter dry brushes to build up detail. In this case, a neutral gray after the dark gray, then a very light sky gray on the tips. When combined with a wash, you get a very good color gradient from a pure black in the recesses to a neutral gray on the tips that I think is fast and a really good and easy way to paint a decent like tabletop black. Obviously you could get a little heavier and artsier with it, but I mean, this is like 5 minutes of dry brushing. You can't beat that. A lot of people will be turned off by the texture of dry brushing, but there are ways to alleviate that, and personally, I don't really mind the dry brushing texture. I think it gives the eye a little something to look at. I know these are armor panels that are nice and smooth, but these are my nitty-gritty Marines, and I like a little something for the eye to chew on. While these are dry brushed and ready for the wash, we'll hold off on that as I wanted to paint his codex markings before washing the entire mini. Given that we're painting sergeants today, we'll be referencing the Codex Astartes armor markings, specifically the revisions in the Era Indominus that Rabute Guilliman implemented after his resurrection. Our mini will have a red helmet, and I'm not sure if the tiny chapter symbol on his knee is mandatory, but to be honest, I just didn't really feel like painting it at the time. If I remember correctly, I had a migraine, so that's my excuse. Given the significance of the 4th Company to the Black Consuls, I thought it would be cool if this Marine was a sergeant in the Black Consuls' 4th Company, a feat possible thanks to their Primaris reinforcements. After painting the red and green, I handled the metallics laying around the mini, mainly weapons and whatsits. With all the base coats and highlighting done, we'll cover the entire mini in a black wash, diluted with some paint medium. While generally knowing absolute dog shit about them going into this project, I come to really like the Black Consuls. Their established lore is a mix of victory, loss, death, rebirth, and it all comes around to make the chapter very complete overall, like it's really been lived in, you know? It's an easy scheme with some color variation baked into it with the codex markings, even though most people will probably just do 2nd Company for the slick-ass gold trim. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really blame them, it looks good. But for me personally, with this project, I wanted my mini to tie into that lore about 4th Company. Overall, though, a very cool chapter, and I consider myself a Black Consuls fan now. If you're gonna start a Black Consuls kill team, army, whatever though, make sure you don't fuck up the Codex compliant armor markings, because I have a feeling if you do, the other Black Consuls players are gonna laugh you out of the room. So I'm just looking out for you. Don't fuck it up. You can't say, I'm a Black Consuls player, and, you know, I know the Codex Astartes like the back of my hand, and then it's like, oh, look at him, you messed up his pauldron colors, and dude, it's gonna be embarrassing.
Sometimes you have to take a break from being the kind of boss that's always trying to teach people things. Sometimes you have to just be the boss of dancing.
We're breaking alphabetical order here a little bit to talk about the White Consuls, who shockingly have no connection to the Black Consuls despite how badly I want there to be one, or how much other people believe there is one. Featured in a few books like the Lords of Silence and having existed since the 3rd edition Ultramarines Codex, the White Consuls are a bunch that value wisdom and leadership as much as they do martial prowess. Many of the White Consuls serve as planetary consuls and governors during their service, a requirement for any battle brother looking to attain any level of leadership rank. While this territorial leadership is unorthodox for a chapter of Astartes, what's even stranger is that the White Consuls actually have 2 chapter masters. One chapter master acts as battle master for the forces stationed near the Eye of Terror, and the other governs from their homeworld of Saltine? Yeah, Saltine. Okay, well, let me clarify. It's more like past tense govern the homeworld. You see, the Lords of Silence, the actual Lord of Silence, not the book Lords of Silence, named after the warband. Although never mind. The Lords of Silence, reinforced by the Weeping Veil, expelled the White Consuls from their homeworld, corrupting it and turning Sabatine into a demon world overrun with plagues. Now the White Consuls are dealing with an even greater foe than chaos: the housing market. Despite having no relation to the previously mentioned Black Consuls, both chapters are pretty zealous adherents to the Codex Astartes, so quote-unquote standard marine operations are pretty much on par for the chapter. However, it is noted the White Consuls also prefer steel rain tactics, so for the miniatures pose, I wanted something with a little momentum in it. Given their tendency to be leaders and advisors, I wanted the White Consul to be using the pose that I'm going to call Commander's Point with the Gun Up pose. One thing I tried to pay attention to here and in general were pistol holsters. I feel like they are a slightly overlooked aspect to Marine conversions. For this project, I interchanged regular intercessor and monopose assault intercessors, the assault ones having these big ass holsters for their big ass pistols. If the model wasn't holding a pistol, I'd try to cut off the holster and put something new in its space, usually a holstered pistol. In general, if they're holding a pistol, empty holster. If they're not, holstered pistol. I'm saying holster a lot, and it doesn't sound like a word anymore. Arms in general are very easy to attach to a mini, maybe sometimes needing a tiny bit of green stuff if they don't sit quite flush to the body, but when it came to the pauldrons, they didn't quite sit right on the shoulders. It's not a big deal. I just put a tiny blob of green stuff and super glue under there to help give them that solid attachment point. For painting, I would normally do my normal method, which entails base coating a light gray, dry brushing white, washing black, then dry brushing again, but after painting some white Chaos Marines for my Your Dude subscriber special, I wanted to try working directly off of the white primer for a generally brighter result. I started by throwing down base coats, the first one being a gray for the armor joints and gun casing. Afterwards, I painted his helmet red because, again, he is a sergeant. The standard depiction for the White Consuls show that they are 4th Company, normally, but seeing as I did 4th Company for the Black Consuls, I changed it up. Since the Aquila is gold, I decided on 2nd Company for the matching gold pauldron banding. See, I told you, it just looks good. I understand, guys. Plus, it happened to match the White Consuls action figures they have out now. I've seen a lot of people go crazy over these action figures. They're really popular for some reason. Would you guys be interested in me getting one of those and repainting it? I don't know. I feel like it could be a fun little project. Anyways, brown on the leather bits before I mix a flat blue and a blue-green together for the pauldron symbol. The chapter symbol isn't flat blue. It's got a little bit of a green, maybe a pinch of white in it. So if you're painting it, just don't use a flat blue. Now it comes to giving everything depth with a wash. While the best option would probably be gloss varnishing the whole thing and using some Tamiya panel liner, I've got plenty of it laying around, I really didn't feel like doing that since I'm already painting and I didn't want to lose my momentum for the night. Instead of that, I mixed some Army Painter black with some glazed medium in a 1:2 ratio and began slapping it on one section at a time. I made sure to focus it into the crevices, but I also cleaned my brush to wick away the wash on the flat areas. This ensures that the wash sticks into the low areas, but the high spots and flat areas were left clean for the brightest white I could get without needing to repaint it, which saves a lot of time if you're painting an army. Instead, I take a bit of pure white and give the model a light dry brush, which helps brighten it up just a little bit after the black wash dunking it just got. With that, we do the final steps, mainly painting the eyes, attaching the base, and painting the base frame. The white consoles can be a challenge, as white is historically a hard color to paint. Even, I keep trying to tinker with white, and some things work, some things don't, but I feel like if you can start with a really solid white, you don't have to mess around with it too much. Like, if the contrast between the highlights isn't strong enough for your liking, you can start from an off-white or light gray to make them stand out more. But in general, if you're just doing an army's worth, or you're like me and you fucking suck at this, just a bright white primer, and then just make sure it hits the recesses, and then you just don't fuck with it anymore. Honestly, there are 1.5 billion videos about painting white armor, leagues better than anything I could do. So pick your poison, really. Lore-wise, though, the white consuls are pretty cool, serving a more administrative role in their primary duties, and I like that a lot, actually. I feel like you're slightly squandering the Astartes talents for essentially civilian leadership positions, but given that the average Imperial citizen has the intelligence of spilled milk, I feel like it's more effective than I initially thought, and after thinking about it for a little while, yeah, I'm kind of a fan.
Why won't you die?
The Excoriators are Imperial Fist successors of a prestigious origin, but a dark nature, mostly featured in the novel Legion of the Damned. Yes, those Legion of the Damned, they show up as well. During the Siege of Terra, where that one guy tried to trespass into his dad's workplace or something, I don't remember the details, but during the kerfuffle, the Imperial Fists were in charge of the palace's defenses. A group of those fisty boys were commended for their outstanding resilience in the face of the galaxy's most infamous novel series, and granted their own successor chapter. The Excoriators went on to fight in many wars and win many honors. They successfully responded to the Last Wall Protocol when Terra was threatened. They fielded 8 companies in the 13th Black Crusade, and the defense of Syrtis Minor against the Holocaust Blood Crusade. Yes, the very same cholera holocaust that the Angels Eradicant fought against. It's a small galaxy, If any single word could be used to describe the Excoriators, it'd be,
I'm fucking invincible!
The Excoriators are most well known for their extremely worn down power armor, commonly adorned with las burns, indents, and scrapes that all chronicle the Battle Brothers' past conflicts. When their gear is damaged, they simply repair it to restore functionality, much like my shoes I wore in high school, with soles that you could fold over straight in half. We weren't poor, I just really liked getting my money's worth out of shoes. I'm still like that, my shoes are totally fucked, but anyways. Reverence of the damaged armor translates to the flesh, as the Excoriators glorify scars their bodies accumulate through their service. To add to the ritualistic maiming, disagreements within the chapter are settled through the trial by the blade. This ritual sees 2 Astartes entering a ritualistic duel where the goal is to simply draw blood from your opponent. Of course, just like fencing, only certain target areas are valid, so in this instance, you may wound the rest of the body as you see fit, with the main target being the face. One person cuts the other's face, the loser acknowledges the winner's decision, and both Marines are honored for taking part in the duel. Given the prevalence of facial scarring, I wonder if there's any relation here, or inspiration between German Menser fencing? I don't know, seems like a small relation, or inspiration at least. Oh, and while we're on the subject of honor duels, yes, the Excoriators are avid contestants of the Feast of Blades, the fucked up death tournament that all Sons of Dorns look forward to. Who knows, maybe they bumped into the Death Strike there. Another defining feature of the Excoriators is Dorn's Darkness, a crippling genetic defect carried by all Excoriators in their catalepsian node. When Dorn's Darkness looms over a battle brother, they enter a comatose state, where they are utterly engulfed by Rogel Dorn's unfiltered depression upon losing the Emperor as he once was. Unable to respond, eat, or drink, the afflicted battle brothers are left in the care of the Master of Sanctity, who offer them spiritual treatments. While these help the Marines, it was ultimately up to the individual's spiritual resilience to see them through the darkness or die trying. For the Excoriator conversion, I wanted to utilize this bolt rifle with the grenade launcher mounted under it. It's got real Schwarzenegger energy to it, and the forward pose does a lot to add a sense of power and invulnerability. A lot of the Excoriator's identity is drawn from weathering, and while I feel like a lot will be added in the painting phase, I'm going to water down a little Typhus corrosion and then apply it to the larger areas of the model. I could have done this before priming to save myself from doing it twice, but hey, why do something the smart way when you could do it the dumb way? The Excoriator's paint job was fairly simple, and in retrospect, I think I did a little bit of a disservice, but I'll quickly walk through what I did. The initial fuck up was spraying it silver, then realizing I needed it white to work off of a white primer, so I had to respray it. After painting the leather and the other black portions of the armor, I simply sponged them, and I left most of the highlighting down to mainly occur in the washing phase. I applied a mix of black and brown wash overall, and my goal wasn't necessarily to do a fast weathering job, but I think by doing little weathering, I messed up the final product. Like, it doesn't look great to me. I have historically always been a very bad weatherer, and I think this guy definitely shows that I still have something to learn. At the very least, some way or some form of learning in making the weathering phase faster. Overall though, the Excoriators seem to be a very perfect fit if you want to do a lot of that weathering. Their normal uniform is like some flavor of white. Actually, they used to be quartered green and yellow, which is a little ugly, but I kind of like it. I could see some veterans within an Excoriator's army still sporting the old colors, or, some kind of small reference to the green and yellow. But I feel like a white power armor is like the perfect surface to do a bunch of staining and washing, I'd really look into armor modeling. Like, I watch a lot of Night Shift, and this dude is not even a demigod, but like a god at modifying and weathering tanks. So if you really want to go next level with your weathering game, considering poaching some ideas from him, I just didn't for this video because time constraints, and at the end of the project I was really hesitant to go back and fix anything just because this has taken so long. But then going forward, yeah, I need to keep working on my weathering. But if you like weathering or you're really good at it, these guys are perfect.
I fear no man, but that thing, it scares me.
Loyalist Marines raised during an unknown founding, the Iron Talons are White Scar's successors, something that we honestly need more of in general. Unlike the previous chapters, there's not a lot of known lore about the Iron Talons beyond their appearance. These sons of the Khan wear black with silvered arms and yellow on their pauldrons. While this is all fine and dandy, the Iron Talons have a cruel and barbaric reputation surrounding them for their method of skinning their enemies and draping said skin over their armor. While this certainly gives a very terrifying and malicious air of hostility to the Iron Talons, I also desperately want to see a friendly competition between the Iron Talons, Night Lords, and a bunch of flayed ones racing to see who can skin the most unarmed civilians. I don't know, man. I think it'd be a hoot. So here's the mini I mocked up in preparation for this chapter. With a menacing pose and plenty of spots to hang some skin, I was ready to do the Khan proud. Then I stumbled into a passage of text that changed my plan entirely. In the 8th edition White Scar supplement, there's a passage that references White Scar's successors, the few that exist anyways. I'll post the whole passage on screen as well as the source, but I'll read aloud the relevant excerpt. All display the bold, aggressive strategies that typify the White Scars' approach to war, though each favors certain aspects of their Primarch's teachings. The Solar Hawks, for example, field many airborne elements in their strike forces, while the Dark Hunters favor stealth over speed when ambushing their prey. So as we've learned, some of these successor chapters tend to emphasize one methodology over others that give them a bit of their identity. I wanted to do that with the Iron Talons, since they're known to be especially terrifying for a 7-foot-tall superhuman hypno-baptized into a murderous death cult. And bear with me, as much as I like this mini, we're going back to the depths of Phobos Armorland. No, not infiltrators. No, not even incursors. Even deeper. Yeah, that's right. Reavers. Now bear with me here. As much of a joke Reavers have been since 8th edition, I have to move for them being a legit addition to an Iron Talons force. As previously stated, each chapter embodies a certain method of warfare and their strategies, and I like to think of it by game mechanics. The White Scars have ground mobility in the movement phase, the Solar Hawks use flying movement, Dark Hunters might use some stealthy shooting, and a lot of Scar's successors have the melee phase down pat. However, with the Iron Talons' terror tactics and the existence of the Reaver, I feel like they can reinforce that identity as the goth friend in a group of preps by attacking their opponent's morale with battle shock tests. Sure, it's not really viable against every army, but you'll certainly have massive Iron Talon cred in this house when you slap your Reavers on your friend's guardsman blob and steal the objective for those crucial game-changing points. Now technically I don't own any Reavers, as tempting as it is to buy a sprue of those delicious skull helmets. I'm going to settle for modifying an infiltrator. While I generally also look for any desperate, small, little excuse to not paint skin tones, I actually do have the mask-only variant of the Reaver head that features the skull mask, part of a sprue that came in my recent eBay winnings. I didn't know this, but in lore, the Reaver skull mask apparently opens up and emits a guttural, ear-piercing banshee howl, which is how they spook people. I just figured it was for looks. With the Infiltrator/Reaver Phobos love child assembled in a fairly standard fashion, being an aggressive knife-wielding pose, I began to channel my inner Night Lord and start draping some putty on him to represent his flayed skin adornment. Flayed skin and tattered cloth are one of those things that I really want to get good at, and while I don't think I did the best job here, I think it's okay. As for painting, the Iron Talons are mostly black, so we'll be doing the standard 3-stage dry brushing that I normally do for black armor. Starting from a black primer I base on... I don't know why I wrote this again. I've explained this twice already. We get it. Paint it black. Skip. With the black armor painted, I turn to the yellow pauldron symbols. To do this, you really just paint them yellow, but I like my yellow to be like eye-destroyingly bright, like flashbang bright. To do this, I base coat the area with a light gray and work it up to a pure white. If you're having trouble painting yellow onto black like you would do here, or you're getting that kind of green shade, mix your first few base coats with a light gray, like this Vallejo light gray, before layering on your pure yellow. It'll cover much faster. Then I take my Bad Moon Yellow contrast paint here and paint a solid layer of it onto the white. Give it a little more vibrancy. Either way you want to go about it, just make sure you get a nice smooth yellow, since it's the only bright spot on such a dark model. You want to give it a little attention since it catches the eye so easily, you know. Do note that the Iron Talons are not specified to really deviate away from the White Scar's adherence to the Codex Astartes, so the Sergeant's company marking should go on his right leg. It didn't really specify, like, color, and like what marking really works well on the geometry of Phobos armor, so I settled on this little lightning-shaped yellow marking to match the chapter colors. This particular symbol here on the right leg denotes him as a sergeant of the 2nd Company, and this symbol on the left knee denotes his place in the 7th Squad. With the yellow done, we can now do the metallics. I waited to do the silvers till after the yellow for a particular reason, but I can't actually remember what it is right now, so hey, you know, do in whatever order you want. Just put the yellow on, and then the silver on. Speaking of some flavor of dead skin, I turned my attention from the leather to the flayed skin hanging on the model. When it comes to skin, I hate it for multiple reasons, mostly because I just suck at painting it, but also I think I overthink it, and by trying to find an appropriate mix of ethnicities for the sake of inclusivity over my army. I personally feel like in the grim darkness of the far future, everyone has an equal opportunity to get their skin ripped off, but for the sake of contrasting with the dark lower half of the model, I'm going to go for a tanny, fleshy tone for the tops of the skin, and a dark red for the fleshy underside. Also, for our Marine's bare head, the Iron Talon's homeworld is not really expanded upon lore-wise, so I'm going to assume it's unchanged from the standard White Scars Marine, and go for a generic brown guy skin tone, maybe a little darker. After all, it doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, East Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, whatever horrific mutt mixture you also are, but when a white man sees you at Home Depot, you're just a brown guy, and he'll ask you to hop in his truck bed to take you to build a fence for some cash. It's been 12 years at this point, and it absolutely blows my fucking mind. I was just there to get some bug spray, not build a fence. Thank you. The Iron Talons are a chapter I wish we saw more of in official content, because they're really fucking cool, actually. While I'm sure my interpretation isn't exactly peak Iron Talons core in the original creator's mind, I still really like this model. Like, you guys know me, I'm not a fan of Phobos armor, and Reavers are kind of silly and still taken as a joke, but this model here might genuinely be one of my favorite models for this whole series. Like, the pure menace of the pose, the flayed skin, billowing in the wind, like Night Lords players, I get it, man. The skin, it's cool. I understand you guys now. I get it. But yeah, I really like these Iron Talons. The paint scheme is cool. The black, silver, yellow intermingling. When it came to the Excoriator mini, I felt like I could do better. When it came to the Iron Talons Marine here, man, this shit fucking rocks. Fuck it, it's perfect.
People are cleaning up after him. People remind him to bring his coat. They buy him food. They worship him. They used to people wouldn't give him the time of the day. But now that he's a god of this game, people will do anything that he wants. The power that he holds by being so excellent, have to respect it.
Hailing from the world of Necros, the Marines Exemplar are one of those chapters with about a paragraph of lore to their name. Being from an unknown genetic descent, the Marines Exemplar are most known for getting fucked over by the Space Wolves. Not exactly the most glamorous honor, but, let me explain. The time period for the previously mentioned fucking over occurred during the 13th Black Crusade, because a lot of shit happened during the 13th Black Crusade, let's be honest. The chapter master of the Space Wolves, or Great Wolf as he's called, because of fucking course he's a Great Wolf. Ugh, God, I hate Space Wolves. The Great Wolf was Logan Grimnar. The old dog was appointed as the supreme commander of the Imperial forces guarding the Cadian Gate from the forces of Chaos. As part of his effort, Logan Grimnar ordered the Marines Exemplar to unleash the full force of their chapter in the Segmentum Obscurus, save for one reserve company. In accordance to Logan Grimnar's strategy and deployment, the Marines Exemplar saw their chapter broken up and scattered across a number of different war zones in the sector. The chapter master of the Marines Exemplar, Maxim Absalon, great name by the way, seriously, that's fucking cool, was lost in the conflict on the jungle-covered moon. The Marines Exemplar were making an attempt to extract the senior officers of an astropathic way station on a jungle moon when they were overwhelmed by the 5th Columnus Regiment, an Imperial Guard force that had had their Joker moment. Most of the Marines Exemplar managed to escape, but Maxim Absalon's Thunderhawk. God, that just sounds cool. Maxim Absalon's Thunderhawk. The Thunderhawk had been shot down in the retreat, producing a gnarly explosion as it hit the jungle ground. The chapter holds hope that Absalon somehow survived and is hiding behind enemy lines, but the chances are pretty grim at best. For now, a new chapter master is acting in his place, Captain Raoul, who grew distasteful of Logan Grimnar's battle plans that saw their beloved chapter master disappearing. For the remainder of the conflict, Chapter Master Raoul ignored any and all deployment strategies of the Old Wolf, moving his forces through the sector as he and his personal advisors deemed fit. It is currently unknown what the Marines Exemplar are up to, or if Maxim Absalon was ever located. Also, fuck the Space Wolves. All my homies and the Marines Exemplar hate the Space Wolves. The conversion for the Marines Exemplar Marine is relatively simple. The model mainly consists of attaching intercessor arms to an assault intercessor body, and I kept this conversion simple deliberately. A problem I had in this project was being worried my conversions weren't interesting enough, but sometimes simply an arm swap is all you need to make an interesting model. Some people may not be willing or able to make big complicated sculpts, and I get that. Not everyone has the skill or even the budget or even, the want or need to do that. So I felt like a simple bolt rifle marine in a running pose would be appropriate for a member of the Marines Exemplar, their name literally meaning the ideal marine. The only real modification I made was gussing up a little bit with a little tilt shield and a fancy pauldron, and honestly, shit, simple, solid, I like it. While some see it as plain, I'd be more than willing to add a guy like this to my army, although there's one major issue I personally have with it. See, over this project I made a strong effort to make sure every chapter has a Pauldron STL for those wanting to make one of these chapters for an army or kill team, whatever, whether it's a free Pauldron or somebody selling the STL for cheap. My priority was something that looked good and wasn't too expensive. So over the course of like 2 hours and poring over tutorials, I personally made this STL for people to use on their own models. The STL will be linked in the description and available for free on my Cults 3D page. However, you may see that I glued a regular pauldron on the Marine's left arm. I forgot to print it. The Marines Exemplar are predominantly black, which is great for me because the one thing I am consistently good at is black power armor. Just like the Iron Talons, I did the whole run through of the black. I explained it already. Dark gray, light gray on the tips, the most like extreme parts of it. Actually thinking about it, does anybody remember that show The Most Extreme on the Animal Planet? I watched it a lot when I was a kid, but man, in retrospect, that show was kind of weird. This show, I can say, without a doubt, installed some unspeakable fetish into somebody as a child. But anyways, with that generally harrowing revelation, I base coat the arms with a red. Since this marine is a bit simple, I wanted to experiment on my red just a little bit. For the base coat, I dabbed a tiny bit of blue into the red to darken it down slightly and push it more towards a cooler red. After that, I dry brushed on the unaltered flat red, leaving my darker base coat in the recesses. Finally, I mixed in a bit of orange into my red for a highlight, giving it a cool to warm gradient over the red. Well, maybe not a gradient, more like a spectrum, I guess. There's probably a more advanced term for this, but I'm a professional smooth brain and I don't know that term, so we'll just go with temperature spectrum. Copyright. With a fairly simple conversion and a equally fairly simple paint job I feel like painting the Marines Exemplar for an army would go fairly quickly. At this point, I think I'm coming to terms with the fact that I really like having the arms be a different color from the body. It happened with the Blackguard, happens with Angels Eradicant, and now I'm here at the Marines Exemplar. I think I just really like this paint scheme. At least I'm consistent. The base here was made with some aquarium plants. I considered ordering some jungle plant base, or even like those little like paper plants, or maybe even like little brass etched plants, but I didn't want to wait for the order to come in, and plus I like the charm of the aquarium plants. I feel like they have a little bit of personality in them that you don't really see anymore these days. I guess an old school charm is what it would be. I used some rainbow plants for this Lizard Man warband I made a long time ago. It has a very old school vibe to it as well, and it already had a nice color scheme that complemented the mini, so I just sprayed the plants with some matte varnish. The plants are really smooth plastic, so the varnish allowed me to put a brown wash on the plants without having it all slide off. Like, I could actually like paint it, you know. The process for the jungle floor was a method Wylock used for his jungle scatter tutorial that utilizes Italian seasoning and parsley flakes. For a basic material as little as 80 cents a bottle at Walmart, I think you get a really good effect for the time to effort to money ratio. Plus, you know you're at Walmart, so just get your groceries, walk over and get some of these parsley flakes and Italian seasoning, walk to the pet section, get a little thing for your aquarium. You just grab something with some plants on it. Boom, you one-stop shop, unless your PetSmart happens to sell like cooking spices and seasonings as well, in which case I think I would be worried.
I think his mate saw me.
Yes, he did.
The Night Watch are another chapter of lesser amounts of lore. A Space Marine chapter of unknown genetic origin. They hail from the planet... the planet... Get it? Because the planet's called... Because it's called Silence and I didn't say anything. Because... The Night Watch sport a black uniform with a cobalty blue on their helmets and pauldrons. Interestingly, in their official art, they're seen with a yellow stripe on the knee. While the yellow stripe on the knee is a Codex Astartes approved company indicator, during the defense of Cadia, the Night Watch deployed 11 companies in the conflict, drawing its adherence to the Codex Astartes into question. In addition to the 13th Black Crusade, the Night Watch were also integral in the Zeist campaign. The Tau forces of the eastern fringe of the galaxy had begun to push in the Damocles Gulf, causing the Imperium to respond with the Zeist campaign, a counteroffensive meant to push the Tau back out of the area. While the Night Watch contributed forces to the liberation of Agura, the entirety of the response of the Zeist campaign had been a trap that Commander Shadowsun set out for the Imperium. As the Night Watch and other Imperial forces celebrated their successful victory at halting the Tau expansion, it was merely a diversion. The furthest reaches of their conquest were meant to be sacrificed when the Imperium counterattacked, for the Tau could spread out and dig in deep into the other areas of space that were more fruitful. So yes, while the Night Watch did technically help defend against the Third Sphere expansion in very key areas, it was sadly all a ruse. The Night Watch's lore kind of begins and ends at the Zeist campaign, so without much lore to cover, I'm going to go ahead and just go to the conversion. In my mind, the Night Watch operate in a manner of their name, watching from the shadows, or more of a forward scouting observation kind of deal. So I wanted a mini with a lot of detecting systems and surveillance scanning gear. Then I remembered I had a Phobos Marine with all these detector bits and a headset. I genuinely did like the default model's pose and the gear for this Marine, so I kind of just built it straight out of the book. You could call that a cop-out, but two major things. One, I think this model looks great for a stealthy observer type. And two, fight me, nerd, 3 p.m. after school by the flagpole, where I totally beat your ass last time. But we have to stop before my mom shows up or she's going to freak because I lied about my grades. The painting for the Night Watch is once again black armor. Thank God I have a decent method for this black armor because I seem to be painting a lot of fucking black armor lately. We'll skip the process since I've done it a few times. So now that we have our black done, sans the shade, we'll do the blue, which is pretty damn straightforward. While I started with a flat blue, I put a very tiny dot of black into it to hopefully make more of a cobalt blue, which I don't think quite worked, but that's fine. I also made sure to use a light gray on the helmet for the stripe and the chapter heraldry, hitting the skull on the heraldry with a flat red afterwards. After everything was in place, I shaded the entire model with a black wash mixed with a glaze medium 1:1. While I've been using a brown-black mix for most of this video so far, using only black will help keep the colors cool, since black and blue are generally colder on the color temperature gauge, temperature spectrum, whatever. However, while the model is a nice dark color, I feel like the stronger shade may have smashed out some of the depth at some of the areas on the black armor, as it looks just a tad too homogeneous. Oh well, live and learn. For some unexplainable reason, I really like the Night Watch. Something about their name and the uniform just kind of sparks my imagination, and it runs wild with them. Like having a million ways to interpret them, but still having some sort of, guidelines. As you can see here, I ended up going with a desert base, mainly just for variety. I had not done a desert base, and I didn't have one lined up in the grand scheme of things, and I figured, why not? It doesn't really blend in with the model itself, but at least the warm sand contrasts with the cool armor. I find it interesting that the Night Watch are on the list of Astartes Praeses, but the majority of their lore involves their interactions with the Tau. Thinking about it on the entire list, there aren't a lot of other chapters that have messed around with the Tau, so it's nice to have that variety in there. It does also make me wonder how serious they take their duties guarding the Eye of Terror. Like, were they reluctantly called away to participate in the Zeist campaign, or were they just like, yeah, sure, whatever, I ain't got nothing better to do? But either way, I really like the Night Watch. I get why you guys will play them, if there are any Night Watch players out there. If there are, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from people with these small niche armies. So yeah, Night Watch players, sound off. I want to hear from you guys.
Groovy.
Okay, so before we start on this, I need to preface it with something. I have looked at every piece of fiction that covers either the Mythos Angelica Mortis or the Astartes Praeses, and the Reclaimers do not appear on any of them. However, the fandom wiki lists the Reclaimers as a member of the Astartes Praeses on the page for the Mythos, but not on the Astartes Praeses. So by all accounts, the Reclaimers should not be on this list. But the more I thought about it while I was homebrewing a replacement, I thought, well, why not?
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
Now, if I'm missing something that actually does place them as belonging in the Astartes Praeses, please let me know. But as much as I'd love to accumulate a 40k novel collection, I would literally never touch. I'm not going to buy the entire book to verify just a few facts about these guys, so let's just settle for Googles and wikis, yeah? And before you ask, yes, I checked the high seas for these books, and I couldn't find them. Granted, I don't check the high seas for books very often, so maybe I was just looking in the wrong spots, but, it's literally spending money to look at the book and say, okay, and then never touch. Like, those Blood Angels books that I bought for the Red Wings video, yeah, I've never touched them. Sorry. I just don't read 40k books. I don't really read books in general. Rule books, but not like stories. Actually, anybody remember those big books about like castle diagrams and shit? But to get back on topic, no one's even gone so far as to paint a Reclaimer miniature. From what I can tell, if you Google their name, it's just a bunch of Valrak's homebrew chapter, the Reclaimers of Dorne. As a minor officiate of Forgotten Lore, I am personally inducting them into the Astartes Praeses because nobody fucking cares about them anyways. So today, we will care. The Reclaimers are a Space Marine chapter surrounded in mystery that are prominently featured in the Caiaphas Cain novels. And I'm going to be honest, for many years I thought it was Scythes Cain, but about 15 minutes ago I learned it's Caiaphas. Besides their proximity to Old Cain, the Reclaimers are most known for their war gear, which is notably more intricate and of a higher performance than the standard Astartes war gear. This may be a benefit from their very close ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus, which sees that their technology is generally a cut above most other chapters. The Tech Marines and Apothecaries put that tech to good use, with the Reclaimers boasting high-quality cybernetics and augmentations onto their lads. Given the closeness to the AdMech, their general level of technology, and sharing a chapter organization with them, the Reclaimers are suspected to be Iron Hand's successors, although nothing has ever been confirmed. Because it's Iron Hand's adjacent lore, so they're never going to touch that. Sorry, guys. That's not a jab at you Iron Hands players. No, it's fucked up. The Reclaimers are mostly known for the adventures they share with the previously mentioned Caiaphas Cain in his novels. Now, I certainly don't have the time or, honestly, the interest to read all of those books. I can lightly touch on a few things they've accomplished to avoid spoiling those books for you guys. The Reclaimers were involved in the cleansing of Viridia, helping to break a siege on the Imperial Governor's palace. However, it was quickly apparent that Viridia had also come under Genestealer infestation, their brood traceable back to a space hulk they called the Spawn of Damnation. After Kane's misadventures through the space hulk, the Reclaimers stayed behind to purge the Xeno filth from its corridors for the next 30 years. However, this was a bit of a weak cover on their end, as they were more interested in potentially recovering Archaeotech and looting the relics on board. Parents, take note. This is why you have to keep an eye on the kids that hang out with your kid. Otherwise, they pick up bad habits, you know. When it came to making the Reclaimer miniature, I wanted to get a little fancier with their gear to reflect their kinship with the AdMech. To do that, I decided I'd take my standard Intercessor body and turn the mini into a Hellblaster. I feel like it would let the Reclaimer stand out in the middle of a crowd, and well, I've got the bits, so I may as well use them for some variety, you know? The first thing was that I swapped out the power pack for one found in the Infiltrator kit, since they get these little scope dudes at the top. Since the plasma gun itself attaches to a hose that mounts onto the back of the power pack, attaching it now gives me a solid foundation for attaching the arms. I stick the right arm on first using superglue on the torso and some plastic glue on the hose tube thing. When it was all lined up and looking nice, I attached the left arm as well, which needed a small gap filled with some green stuff. One chapter quirk of theirs is that they have a large stash of Mark VI Corvus helms in their armory. These helmets are given to battle brothers that distinguish themselves or prove their valor, so just to fancy this guy up a little more, I shall bestow upon thee mine sacred beaky helmet. The Reclaimers have no listed chapter heraldry on file, so I found this Iron Hands clan pauldron that I like the shape of and just stole it to use here. I know there's like 2 Iron Hands players watching this who are going to be mad that I chose this particular pauldron, but hey, I mean, blame GW for not giving them a symbol. Plus, I kind of like the idea of reinforcing the subtext of being Iron Hands descendants. I don't know, it just feels right. When it comes to the Reclaimer's paint scheme, they are described as off-white with yellow on their faceplates and hands. To make a good eggshell kind of color, I mixed yellow into pure white and like the most absolutely microscopic dot of brown you could possibly comprehend. With such a light mixture, any hint of dark color goes like 900 times farther than you would expect. So you could just save yourself from a headache and just get a good off-white in a paint bottle. I didn't have one, so, you know, here I am. After the armor was finished, I hit the joints and all of the metallic areas with a dark gray, dry brushing all of those areas with a neutral gray. If you've been around a while, you know that I'm trying to use less pure black on my miniatures, so anytime I say dark gray, you can just use black as well. Also, painting this backpack hose reminded me how much I just kind of dislike painting these kind of hoses. I can never seem to muster up the energy to make them look good. I know some people paint the upper tube to match the energy of the weapon, but I don't know if I really like that or not. I mean, I guess if you're going to put color there, you know, you may as well match it, but I don't know. I think I just prefer hazard stripes there, but I never have the energy to do it. Anyway, with the dark gray highlighted, we can start painting on all of the silvers onto metallic areas. However, I did realize that I forgot to highlight the armor when I finished, so first I dry brushed the mini with a pure white onto its edges. Keep in mind that doing this before you paint on your dark gray is a much more efficient use of your time, but you're bound to forget a few steps in a batch of 20. I'd say the proper order for things is to do the off-white armor, the yellow parts of the armor, dry brush everything white, then do the dark gray areas, dry brush them neutral gray, then do your metallics. With all the base coating and dry brushing in order, I washed the entire mini with Army Painter Strong Tone diluted 1:1 with some glaze medium. Strong Tone is like the old Agrax Earthshade and will tint your mini pretty hard, but we just want the panel lines and recesses filled, so diluting it is a multi-purpose step. It helps alleviate a lot of the color tinting of the wash while making the application smoother, which helps prevent coffee staining and tide marks. It also helps your wash go a bit further since you're using less of it technically, but with how good these washes are and that I'm using them for almost every project now, yeah, I got like 9 gallons of this shit laying around. One thing I'm mindful to do is to dry my brush and wick up some of the excess wash pooling on flat surfaces. Leaving it there can create some nice color gradients, but I didn't want the overall mini to read as too brown, so wicking it away from the flat surfaces keeps it just in the recesses.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god. It even has a watermark.
While probably the most controversial addition to the roster, seemingly only spawning from like an accidentally added page on a fan wiki, I feel like the Reclaimers are still a great fit for the title of Astartes Praeses. I'm actually a big fan of the armor scheme with the Crimson Fist style oven mitts going on, although I will admit putting yellow on the faceplate of a beaky really makes it look like a bird's beak. Also, if we compare it to the white Consul here, it's a bit more apparent that it's an off-white, although I fear it looks like a very, very sandy tan. Ah well, you win some, you lose some. I was actually also considering just painting up the entire model as normal, then using a yellow ink or something afterwards to do the faceplate and hands. That could be a pretty fast option if speed is a factor for you. Like you've got the base coat and a highlight dry brushed on already, so you know, just a little ink and bada boom, you got yellow. It could be something to consider.
I want every person name written down who's on the guild right now.
I've got balls of steel.
And when the
I've got balls of steel.
Get the
I've got balls of steel.
Today is a special, momentous occasion in channel history. This segment, right now, marks the first time a Space Marine chapter has been featured twice in these obscure lore videos. The Subjugators were the first chapter I covered in the video about the Achilles Crusade, where I said this little funny line here. They're also one of the few listed chapters in the Astartes Praeses, chapters dedicated to defending the Imperium against anything that slithers out of the Eye of Terror. Not like that's difficult, seeing as half of that fucking list is just gone, but hey, still a rather distinguished group. Who knows, maybe we'll get back to that list one day. Well, Patch John, the time has finally come. Obviously, this double feature phenomenon would happen one day, but I simply didn't expect it to start happening so soon in this series, given the expansiveness of the subject matter. This also means that I'm a bit of a loss as to how to cover the Subjugators. Whether to assume you've seen the previous video or not, or maybe just make a funny joke and lazily copy-paste the lore section of that video here, I think the safest way to go about it is just reintroduce them like this is the first time, but maybe focus more on other engagements of their history, so it'll be new enough for people of all levels of familiarity with the Subjugators. The Subjugators are Imperial Fist successors hailing from the world of Xanax, not Xanax, Xanax, spelled with an E. Where it's spelled with an A, I don't think anyone would get much done there. The Subjugators are faithful zealots of the Imperial cult, hailing the Emperor as a being of divinity, which I feel like is a pretty safe assumption to the common man. Like if you ran into a 15-foot human with a giant flaming sword and glowing eyes, I'm pretty sure Joe Schmo would probably call him some sort of individual with heightened capabilities. The Subjugators mainly operate in the Segmentum Solar, basically the center of the galaxy surrounding Terra, but they also evenly split their forces to operate in the Segmentum Obscurus, basically Galactic North. While a member of the Astartes Praeses operating around the Cadian Gate is really nothing to be shocked about, their obligations in the Segmentum Solar are unknown. There are instances of the entire chapter gathering, however, such as the 13th Black Crusade arriving in Cadia just moments after the entire Subjugators chapter arrived.
Venus, Dr. Wu! You done fucked up now!
I imagine the half stationed in the Segmentum Obscurus were the ones to reinforce Cadia and fight on the surface, such as in the Battle of Castor Partox, and the half from the Segmentum Solar were the ones fighting Chaos in orbit, where the third company most notably managed to take down an overrun Cadian starfort by themselves, a gargantuan feat made easy due to the massive size of their balls of steel. When not involved with massive battles, the Subjugators are known for the complete destruction they leave behind, razing the worlds they visit to the extent where nothing remains for either friend or foe to utilize. This complete annihilation is a double-edged sword for anybody who calls on them, the Imperial forces usually choosing to exhaust every other possible option before calling up the Subjugators. This method of warfare was put to great use in the Second Ebonian Genocide, where the Ordo Hereticus declared the entire Ebonian subsector Diabolos Inculatus, which, yes, I had to Google and kind of piece together a definition there. Together with the Red Hunters and Warbearers chapters assisted by the Order of the Blue Robe and Order of the Black Sepulchre, the Subjugators crusaded through the Ebonian sector for a decade before the area was redeemed. And by redeemed, I mean slaughtered. While the Subjugators definitely do have an impressive rap sheet I could talk about for quite a while, with credits in the Damocles Gulf Crusade and the Third Interguild Wars, the last one I'll personally be touching on is the Tegnetian Belt campaign, since it's so distinct. During their campaign, the Subjugators found themselves attacked by a race of minor Xenos called the Selkin. Little is known about the Selkin, although I think they had an entire arc in Dragon Ball Z. I don't really remember. The Selkin used viral dissemination to breed, their DNA infecting the host and reshaping them into another of their species. The Selkin's true form is described as a flabby, semi-amorphous humanoid with eyes randomly dotting his head. They're literally me, no cap, on God. The third company of Subjugators, pre-suicide attack on the Cadian Starfort, were the unfortunate victims of the Selkin's viral assault. While their enhanced bodies seemed to resist the virus, 20 Battle Brothers were changed into Selkin and escaped into the galaxy. And yeah, they're just out there somewhere, so that's a little worrisome. For the conversion, I wanted my Subjugator to be holding a heavy bolter. Mainly just because I think heavy bolters are really fucking cool. That's it, really. The heavy bolter I'm using here is from the Leviathan box, Monopose Sternguard Veterans, and has a tiny little symbol here on the side of it that looks like a inquisitorial symbol. This was easy enough to trim off with a knife and a sanding stick, although in retrospect I could have just left it on. It's not unheard of for an Inquisitor to hand out little copies of the inquisitorial rosette to people they have conscripted for their services, but retrospect. Before attaching the setup, though, I took a second to swap the empty holster for a properly populated pistol pouch. I also took a second to trim off the pre-molded pauldron on the left shoulder, since this is probably the easiest time to do so. Getting the arms and backpack to line up properly for this little cable thing was finicky, and stupid and dumb, and I hated it, but eventually I got it to settle in a way that was tolerable. Overall, though, it's a fairly simple conversion, barely a part swap, honestly, but I still think it gives a powerful, intimidating aura to the miniature, as if he's marching forward while gunning down his enemies. For the Subjugators paint job, well, I don't really have to do much of anything new, really. I can simply steal the painting method I did in the Achilles Crusade video and just do it again here. From a green base coat, I added yellow to it to make highlight colors that I can dry brush on in lesser and lesser amounts. One thing I do remember for the last final highlight was to start with yellow and then add green to it. You just use a lot less paint that way. I'd say the major change that I want to do to the Subjugator is to represent the third company, as they seem to be the ones in the chapter suffering from light protagonist syndrome. The Subjugators are big fans of Guilliman's Spacebook as well, so we'll follow standard Imperial Fist Codex markings for a third company sergeant. Red helmet, red pauldron banding. It's a nice little coincidence on color matching there. I'm certainly not going to question that. For this little speed painting project, and I say little, like the script is in a gazillion goddamn words and I haven't been editing for weeks now. Anyways, I like to wash as much of the mini as possible at once to cut down on wait times. After all, if you're painting 2 squads of these guys, the wait time does add up. However, I'm using a green shade for the armor here to help give that little bit of depth in the greens, and it means I've got 2 shade steps. It's not the end of the world or anything, I just don't want to tint the whole mini green, but doing them at the same time risks those colors blending into each other. You know, like you might get some of your black that bleeds into your green areas. But when it comes to army painting, it's all about optimizing the balance between effort, time, and result, so you'll find something that works for you. I will say that from my personal experience, a lot of people see painting as a means to an end, and it's easy to forget that sometimes people like the painting step more than they do building. Personally, I'm more of a builder than a painter, but there is a big appeal in getting your stuff colored. I get it. I don't know. It's just a mini tirade about all the meme painting methods, I suppose. I think my brain is just getting broken from seeing fucking slap chop and goon slap and hell, goon slap. I don't think you can do that on YouTube, man. As previously stated, it was only inevitable that a chapter popped up twice in my obscure lore series, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. However, we celebrate milestones here on the channel, so I'm not going to rain on the parade. If I ever do cover the Selkin, however, I'll have not 1, but 2 Subjugators ready to go for the video. Just like my Iron Lord that eventually got a guest appearance in the Barghese video. Multi-purpose builds tickle the feel-good spot in my brain. Also, I really fucking hate those cables.
But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
Because it's right.
The Relictors could be called a shadow of their former selves. Astartes Praeses shunned for chaos worship and hunted by both loyalists and traitors. The list of allies the Relictors can call upon shrinking more and more by the day. But things weren't always this bad for the Relictors, so what the hell happened? Upon their inception, the Relictors were actually known as the Fireclaws. Hailing from the world of Torva Minoris, or Nutra by its natives, the Fireclaws were honored as heroes for their part in many prominent conflicts. While some are more obscure, such as the unspecified Purging of the Cult of the Inner Eye and the Siege of Kokalos, they are also known for contributing to events like the Achilles Crusade and the 13th Black Crusade. Jesus Christ, how many times am I going to say 13th Black Crusade in this fucking video? Anyways, the turning point for the Fireclaws came on the depths of the Space Hulk, the Captor of Sin. It was identified to be the base of operations of a Tzeentchian champion known as the Excoriator. Hey, wait a second. The Fireclaws began their invasion of the Captor of Sin, led by the librarian Decario and an inquisitor, De Marche. Quickly overwhelmed, De Fireclaws made De stand in De engine room of De Rect Amalgam, where De Excoriator began to duel Decario. sorry, Demarche, Decario, you get the joke. The librarian had been horribly maimed through his armor and his sword had been broken, but he retaliated with his power fist, ripping the Excoriator's sword arm from his body. With his life on the line, Decario grabbed the nearest weapon he could and threw out a Hail Mary slice, cutting the champion's head clean off. Quickly, he had realized that he picked up the Excoriator's weapon, a demon weapon harboring accursed energies. He could feel the overwhelming power of the weapon, but it was quickly confiscated by the Inquisitor Demarche. Demarche felt that these weapons could be used to fight the Imperium's enemies and guided the Fireclaws across the galaxy to collect more Chaos artifacts. In this pursuit, they shedded their old name and became the Relictors. Fast forward a couple thousand years to the 13th Black... God damn it. The Relictors contributed all 10 of their companies to the war effort, but adamantly refused to take directions or obey any leadership orders. While they had done the same in the past with the Third War of Armageddon, they had come to butt heads with Yif Lord Logan Grimnar for ignoring his orders to reinforce Cadia, instead warp jumping to the agri-world of Fremis. Logan's Yif scouts reported the Relictors repelling a Chaos force before turning to murder the defenders of a sealed stasis vault. For this and the utilization of various Chaos artifacts, they were reported to the Inquisition. Very quickly were they declared bad boys and had the Grey Knights sent to beat their asses, which they did pretty damn badly actually. Only a few hundred Relictors and a handful of artifacts survived, the chapter fleeing into the Eye of Terror for respite. Once defenders of the space around the Eye of Terror, they now hide inside of it like refugees, determined to carry out their mission and destroy the Imperium's enemies as renegade Astartes. For the Relictors' conversion, I wanted to help differentiate them from a standard loyalist at a glance. One way I did this is by cutting off the gorget and the ridges on top of the Primaris knees. This is something that people converting Primaris models into Firstborn do sometimes, and I feel like it helps it make it more distinct at a glance. Plus, you guys know how I feel about the knees. And we're also going to conveniently overlook the plates on the side of the hips. I like them. The easiest way to give the Relictor vibe is to outfit him with some Chaos weaponry. For this guy, I'm going with a very sergeant-y loadout, plasma pistol and power weapon. In this case, the legendary Chaos Axe, Drinker of Spirits. I don't know, I just made some shit up. I'm also going to opt for the spiky Chaos Space Marine pauldrons because it looks cool, and a Relictor pauldron. Note that this is a Mark 6 pauldron variant and it doesn't feature pauldron bands on it. I like to think that it helps reinforce how long this chapter has been around, wearing a ragtag collection of loyalist and traitor armor of different marks, but at the end of the day, he still has his old, reliable pauldron. After attaching all of this, I stuck on this little scroll bit I found, maybe another Chaos artifact, but don't ask me where it came from, because I couldn't tell you. I also took a second to pin on the head of the Chaos Champion that he probably killed to get that sweet axe. After this, I put the model down for a while, but somewhere along the line I thought, this guy needs a loincloth. Loincloths aren't exactly Chaos Space Marine standard, but I feel like it kind of helps blur the line a little bit, and I don't know, I felt like the pose just kind of needed it. I used combined green stuff and milliput for the tabard, which when cured will give me a solid surface for me to sculpt chainmail on top of. I detailed on how to do this in my Barghese video, but essentially this is the method Mr. Tom Mason uses in his tutorial on YouTube. Essentially get a pointy tool, stab it in and push it one way, then repeat again to deform the first hole into a little crescent. Make a row, then make another row going the opposite direction. Bada bing bada boom, you got chainmail. When it comes to painting the Relictor, I turned to my usual triad for painting black, but I was going to modify it. I dropped the gray black from the dark end and added pure white onto the high end, which will hopefully provide me with a noticeably more gray miniature compared to how I paint black. I paint this on the same way I've been doing all my black, making a small exception for the pauldrons since they're actually black. I used a bit of masking tape on the Relictor pauldron to be able to dry brush it correctly, just for that small bit of depth. From there, it was just a matter of painting on metallics, pouches, all that boring shit you've seen already. I shaded the Mini with a mix of black and brown wash, swapping out one drop of brown with black, which I figured would have prevented the mini from being too brown. This would be correct, but now it's a little too black. I think I tinted the gray a little too far down, and it looks a bit too similar to my black recipe. It's noticeable if you have them in your hand, but it doesn't quite show up on camera. Oh well, as the great philosophers say, live and learn, hanging on the edge of tomorrow. To me, the Relictors are like the poster boys of Renegade Marines. Like, Ultramarines are for Loyalists, and then, Relictors for Renegades, willing to get their hands dirty with the taint of chaos in order to fight them more effectively. Being somebody who kitbashes Loyalist and Chaos Marines a lot, this is like super prime real estate for kitbashing. So if you're on the fence about collecting either army, consider doing something like the Relictors and combining them. In my opinion, the world needs more Relictors players, and I'm happy to do my part to recruit for you guys. So now that we've lightly touched on a chapter that has sort of skirted the line between Loyalists and Chaos, let's touch on one that has just completely gone off its fucking rocker.
It's been a long time since any of us have eaten. And you three gentlemen look delicious.
What does that have to do with
What
us?
are you talking about? I'm a cannibal, hombre. We're gonna fucking eat your ass. Fuck you can't eat us. Fuck that, man.
Renegade worshippers of the minor chaos god of dubious canonicity, the Sons of Malice is the new name of the chaos warband that used to be one of the esteemed Astartes Praeses. However, their old name has been lost to time, their honors and deeds now amounting to jack shit under their new management. But who were they? What happened? How did they get here? While the original name of the chapter is long gone, they were honored as dedicated enemies of chaos, protecting the area around the Cadian Gate. However, their slippery slope into excommunication began shortly after the conclusion of the Cilix 225 campaign. Within the Cilix sector, there were 3 hive cities deep within the depths of the planet's oceans. Heretic forces had threatened to depressurize the hive cities, and I don't really know if you know what happens to a human body when the pressure changes suddenly like that, but the end result across an entire hive world would be very not good.
When it's got ya, it's gotcha.
The Astartes had successfully eliminated the heretic forces within and began their victory rituals. See, the chapter was from the fair world of Celis, where many of the tribes sported many tattoos, and their ceremonial rites included, but were not limited to, cannibalism. While the sons without much malice were celebrating their victory, their party was overheard by Inquisitor Solomon Pietas. Pietas? Actually, I like Pietas more. Pietas was a senior member of the Ordo Hereticus. Being an outsider looking in, he simply saw tattooed, cannibalistic superhumans eating people for 11 years, and he flipped his absolute shit. He called in the Order of Our Martyred Lady and 5 regiments of the Imperial Guard to carry out an assault on the Astartes. However, when they arrived, the Astartes were so hopped up on people jerky that the chapter repulsed the entire assault, a level of ferocity that the Inquisitor was nowhere near ready for. Put it simply, they shut that shit down, and maybe what could be considered not their smartest move, they proceeded to ritually sacrifice Pietas. Fighting back against Imperial forces and then ritually sacrificing their commander, I'd call that a gamer moment. Cut to down the road at a future time, and word about the incident had reached the High Lords of Terra, who were less than enthused about what they just heard.
For the first time in my life, I'm fucking speechless. I got nothing.
The High Lords surprisingly offered the chance of redemption to the Space Marines via a 50-year Penitent crusade, but the chapter master refused, with him being quoted as saying, "We have done nothing wrong. We shall not do penance to any." Which, I kind of agree on one hand. The Imperium is an ignorant, fearful institution, so one could say that Pietas jumped the gun on what he saw. However, you were eating people, and you did sacrifice him.
You have done that yourself.
Needless to say, an extermination fleet was sent to Celis, where the hungry for human hippos tried and failed to intervene. The sons with a little bit of malice fled into the Eye of Terror as the fleet glassed the planet, wiping out the cannibal tribes down to the last man. Within the Eye of Terror, the newly homeless Space Marines turned to chaos worship somewhere over the next 1,000 years. Their master was not one of the main 4 gods, but a minor chaos god that has been since removed from the official canon due to copyright conflicts. The Sons of Malice worship the god they take their name after, the god Malice. Also known as Malal in older editions of Warhammer, Malice is known as the outcast, renegade, or even the rejected god. He embodies indiscriminate chaos, the destructive force of anarchy aimed at everyone, including itself and its followers. To this day, Malal/Malice is still a pretty popular minor chaos god, and I like him too. Chaos is so centered around the big 4 that encompasses everything that it's refreshing to see cults centered around other minor chaos deities. Let's get some more variety in Chaos Bros. Let's bring Malal back, let's throw in the Horned Rat, bring in Fitty. Fuck it, smash Ultimate, everybody's here. For the actual conversion here, I kept it simple, using a Chaos Legionnaire body leaning to one side. This will make for a nice Rambo machine gun pose when paired with this bolter with a very long and very limp clip. There should be a word for these limp clips, but either way, the one thing that I regret about this mini is that I couldn't find a good Sons of Malice pauldron to 3D print for them. If someone happens to find a good one after this goes live, I'll update its entry into the description. Some of you may have noticed that the Sons of Malice actually share the same armor quartering as my own chapter, the Tuatha Dé Danann. In fact, when I was working out the initial schemes, I had a lot of people say, oh, it's just Loyalist Sons of Malice. And I was like, it's better than saying, hey, it's Angel's Defiance for the millionth time. Regardless, this will make painting the Legionnaire a bit of a cakewalk, as I've got some practice with quartered schemes under me belt already. I start from a white primer, and normally I'd put on a light gray to allow me to build up to pure white edge highlights. I'm going to keep the brightness of the white primer since there are no edges to highlight on the Chaos Marine armor. I don't care what heavy metal says, I'm not edge highlighting flat panels. You cannot make me. If you've seen my Your Dudes video where I paint my subscribers' factions, you'll see the kind of revelation that I came to there in action here. I do occasionally learn and retain information sometimes. I begin the brushwork by base coating the black areas and eventual silver areas with dark gray. Dark gray helps me to keep a pure black in the recesses. If you paint straight black, you just don't leave yourself any room to move down with your shadows. I gave a dark gray areas a dry brush with a light gray before moving on to a more focused dry brush of light gray on the few edges this armor has and the upper portion of rounded areas like on the pauldron. Given the brightness of the white armor, I use a gunmetal silver for the silver trim and other bits like on the gun, as if it's too bright it kind of gets drowned out by the white. I add a bit of glaze medium to some known oil to handle the shading, which will help give a smoother result and not tint the white so heavily. You could make a separate mixture for both colors, but why bother when you can do both at the same time, you know? There's always recess shading or panel lighting, but man, I got 20 fucking minis to paint, man. I ain't got time for that. The Sons of Malice are avatars of a bygone era fighting the good fight. I understand things fall in and out of canon as the franchise develops, but I've always been of the opinion that minor chaos gods are an untapped source of material to work off. Everything about chaos is either centered around the big 4 or a generic chaos undivided, so a minor god that caters to chaos undivided with a little bit of personality doesn't really stand out to me. I'm not saying they'll get enough love to show up in a video game or something, but just a little something, Malal/Malice is okay in my books at least. But I really want to piss people off, so bring in the Horned Rat to 40k. Do the Space Skaven, you fucking cowards, you limp dick little bitch. So we've come to the end of part 1, so let's take a bit of an intermission. Go get a snack or refill, take that piss, whatever. Now's a good stopping point for you marathon watchers. I'll give you a second to pause the video. Alright, good enough. Let's get back to it. The end of Part 1 marks the end of Astartes Praeses with substantial lore, and more importantly, a piece of reference artwork to work off of visually. From here, we'll be delving into the second category of the Mythos Angelica Mortis, which I like to consider the more abstract section of the established roster. These 4 chapters have only their names listed in the roster, with no official uniform or chapter heraldry to be found anywhere. This leaves me in a position where I will try my best to combine official material and my own original content, essentially homebrewing the empty space into something that could reasonably represent that chapter. If you're just here for concrete official lore, then this is probably where you'll clock out, but I do hope you stick around. I put a lot of time and effort into trying to make sure there's something interesting here and official sounding enough to at least sound somewhat convincing. I know I touched on it earlier, but this video did take a lot of effort to put together. I've been working on it on and off for about 4 months now. If you're enjoying my video and you're a fan of neglected, obscure, or forgotten 40k lore, please consider liking the video or sharing it with a friend, and if you really like it, I would love your subscription. I really enjoy making this kind of content, and anything you guys can do to help me reach a bigger audience would be immensely appreciated. But anyways, let's get to part 2.
For many of us, the road is a difficult one, but the path is always there for us to follow, no matter how many times we may fall. The good news is that we can help you find your way back. Naturally, some days are harder than others, but I must try.
The Brothers Penitent is our first name-only chapter, and what I ended up doing here is a bit of a 3-part tangent, so bear with me. The Brothers Penitent have no known symbol, homeworld, or lore to any degree, really, so I began by dissecting the name, focusing on Penitent, or the word penance. Now, 2 things immediately came to mind, and the first one was penance from the Marvel comics. While I'm truly not a big comic book fan, like, the only comic book I read is that one issue of Batman vs. Predator. I read it like once a year, and I'm done with it. That being said, I always liked the visual design of their hero, Penance. From what I quickly gathered, Penance was originally a hero named Speedball that had a crisis of identity after an explosion killed about 600 people. The character was apparently not very popular and eventually transitioned back to Speedball, but I've always liked the design. Penance's suit was lined with 1 spike for each person killed in the explosion, and I initially wanted to work from this dropped concept since it meshes really well with 40k's, ultra grim derp aesthetic, and the color palette is really nice and translates perfectly onto the armor of a Space Marine. But in the initial stages, I didn't want to commit to that so early in the process, so for now I stuck that idea on the drawing board. The second part of this tangent came pretty much simultaneously with the first one. Whenever I think of Penance, my mind instantly flashes to the striking design of a monster featured in Final Fantasy X, and aptly named Penance. Penance was the endgame optional super boss of the PlayStation 2 title that was originally only featured in the PAL and Japanese releases of the game. However, when Final Fantasy X got a combination remaster/PC port, the US finally received the international version, allowing us to access this boss. Penance is fought on the deck of an airship and has a difficulty that matched the title of Endgame Super Boss. Penance is accompanied by his 2 arms that fire out a flurry of support and debuff spells, while the main body of Penance just absolutely fucking demolishes you. While I have beaten Final Fantasy X multiple times, as it's one of my favorite games of all time, I've never actually fought this boss in particular, so I'll have to grab some footage here. The credits will be on screen. Out of every boss in Final Fantasy X, I've done Nemesis, I've done all the Dark Aeons, like literally everything almost up to Penance, just not him, which is a little strange in retrospect. Like, I did the Dark Magus Sisters, I did Dark Anima, but not Penance, It's like right there, why not? Anyways, Penance has always had a very distinct visual design to me, with a very pleasing color scheme in the blue and purple regions, and a more saturated, like, reddish brown body. However, there's one thing about Penance that, like, for the life of me, I couldn't get out of my head, and it's this design on his torso, and it kept reminding me of something. I just couldn't figure out what it was, and then it hit me. Yeah, this shit's just the Kabbalah, which means we get to touch on ancient Jewish mysticism now. Alright, full disclaimer, I am not Jewish, nor have any real experience with Judaism. I am personally baptized Catholic, but religion plays no role in my life, so if any passing Jewish guy wants to clarify or correct me on anything, please do so. From my research and minimal Jewish consultation, the Kabbalah is the ancient Jewish tradition for their spiritual interpretation of the Bible. It was visually depicted by the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, which is the design that Penitent had alluded to. The Tree of Life is a symbolic configuration meant to represent many things, such as a map of creation, a path of ascension, and a sort of diagram of the human soul. Each node is called a Sephiroth, yeah, I know, and represents a spiritual principle, with the Sephiroth representing God, or the infinite energy of the divine at the top, and the solidified energy in the material plane at the bottommost node. Eventually, after thinking it over, the Penance for Marvel Comics idea didn't work out, and the more I thought about dipping into this more Kabbalistic view of penance with my little to no qualifications, the more it kind of steered me away from it, so I decided to just stick to what I know, which is, Final Fantasy. While the core of that idea is mainly in the paint job, we have to actually make the model first. So I took this Assault Intercessor body, and I chopped up some arms because I wanted to have him holding a heavy thunder hammer, because hammers are cool and they kind of convey judgment thematically. I used a heavy thunder hammer from the Grey Knights kit, although I did shave off the Inquisition iconography. I didn't actually have any arms to secure the hammer in the pose that I wanted, so I tore up some spare Assault Intercessor arms because God knows I have way too many of those now. The pre-assembled Assault Intercessor I was using had this big hole in the side of it, most likely for me ripping off a glued arm somewhere down the line. To fix this, I just stuffed some toothpick into it and soaked it with some super glue, making it sturdy enough to position and affix some arms for the weapon. Now, while the arms may look janky, don't fret. With some clever cutting, green stuff, and these big, nice pauldrons, we can hide all the sins of this patch job. One idea I had while I was building this was hanging a chain to dangle some skulls from it, and this tied into giving the chapter a bit more of a 40k flavor to it. So excuse me while we shift into some lore. I think for most of these chapters coming up, I'm going to be talking about the lore while I'm painting. Not only is the painting fairly straightforward and the screen can handle that, but my audio narration can handle the actual interesting bits. Now keep in mind, this is all my own original lore. It has nothing to do with the original chapter, but the original chapter had nothing anyways, so, I don't think I'm stepping on any toes here. The brothers Penitent are from an unorthodox shrine world named Pallius Tertius, with their goal being the complete salvation of everyone's souls. While these days it is a service they voluntarily perform, they were initially charged with the duty after some sort of ancient discretion the chapter have since scrubbed from any kind of records. When people of importance in the region pass away, like planetary leaders and politicians, the chapter scouts are tasked with transporting the body back to their homeworld so their skulls can be removed. The rest of the body is given an honorable burial, and the skull is passed to a full-fledged battle brother who makes a commitment to take on the sins of that person. The battle brother swears a solemn oath to help each person they carry with them find true forgiveness and holy combat for the Emperor's name. When the chapter's chaplaincy deems a soul to be saved, their skull is enshrined in one of the planet's massive skull spires, monumental skyscrapers that stand as testaments to the Emperor's unending compassion. While I didn't flesh out that idea as much as some other chapters, I really think it's a cool enough of an idea to refine into something really good. I just really like the idea of the brothers Penitent being at the mercy of the Imperium and taking on a mantle of service of some kind. Also, Yeah, if you're collecting skulls, you're probably going to get the attention of Khorne, but I like to think that the fact that Khorne hasn't done anything to them is a little more ominous than him having done something, you know? Like, Khorne's got something planned for the planet of Pallius Tertius. But obviously, nobody can say for sure. People who are aware of chaos on the planet are, like, kind of like really paranoid about something happening, but you know, they kind of just sweep it under the rug. When it comes to the final result of the mini, my very first thought is that it's too blue. Looking at the inspirational penance, it's I feel like it's maybe a little too saturated. I feel like maybe mixing in some gray would have really gotten the color I was looking for. I do like having the hose and joint bits as that dark blue. I really like that, actually. It just, I feel like it's pretty easy to just make the black parts black, but you know, just adding a little bit of darker color in there, I feel like it kind of does something. I do really like the brown that I ended up settling on. It's just a warm brown. I guess it could be a little more red, but I'm kind of happy enough where it is. Personally, I would consider this Brother's Penitent as like a first draft of sorts, but I feel like with just a little bit of tweaking, you could get something really cool out of this. But overall, though, I like the little bit of lore I established for them. I like the general color scheme and the color pattern. One thing, I would just tweak the blue of the power armor just a little bit, and then I think I'd be spot on. Also, I might have switched the running body. I feel like something with the left leg forward might have complemented the pose a little more, but at that point, all the other bodies were glued together, so, you know. That being said, I did still want to keep a little bit of that Kabbalic influence on this mini. So when it came down to choosing a symbol for the chapter, I chose the Brothers Penitents to share the same symbol as the Marauders. The Marauders have a flaming sword as their chapter heraldry, and the flaming sword is a very prominent reoccurring theme when it comes to religious iconography and mythological iconography in general. Plus, as some people might remember, there's this one character that uses a flaming sword. He was kind of important back in the day. What's his fucking name again? Whatever, it's probably not that important. Also, I chose silver for the pauldron bandings, but looking at the upper crest part of Penance, a gold might have been a little more suitable. I'm not sure, because I like the silver, but a gold might have been a little better for the pauldrons. Yellow was a good accent color, though. That's good shit.
All that matters is that two stood against many. That's what's important. Balor pleases you, Crom. So grant me one request. Grant me revenge. And if you do not listen, then to hell with you.
The Crimson Scythes were a chapter I was a bit stumped with at first, and then I kind of ended up fleshing them out the most. Whether or not that was just me having fun, or if I was trying to overcompensate, I'm not really sure. But I ended up with a result I liked anyway, so who really cares, you know? That being said, the initial idea for this chapter was rough in general. I didn't really have a idea or a theme or a conversion I wanted to pursue just yet. And before you say, oh, just put a scythe on it, no. For two reasons. One, it's called Scythes, give it a scythe. That's low-hanging fruit. That's the midwits cop-out conversion. And two, this is a bit more personal, but I hate scythes as a fantasy weapon. A military scythe? Sure, you know, there's history as an improvised weaponry for filthy, stinking farmers, but let's not pretend that a scything motion is more effective or more practical than a spear or any of its proven brethren. If you like scythes, fine, but they're stupid, and I hate you.
Stop it. Get some help.
Okay, so if a scythe was out of the question, what was I to do? The answer is lightning claws, and let me explain. Instead of the obviousness of wielding a scythe, I looked at scythes in function as well as thematically. A scythe comes down in a sweeping motion to cut numerous stalks of vegetation like grass or grains. In my mind, dual lightning claws accomplish the same thing, coming down to cut numerous stalks of heretics and xenos. Maybe a leader character or something can hold a scythe as a badge of office or something, but for my mini here, the sergeant, we're just going to go with claws to maximize the amount of chaff his squad can cut up. For the conversion, I started with this Assault Intercessor body. The body itself was twisted a little bit to the side, but for my pose that I was going for, I needed a more straightforward pose, so I used this old hobby saw I just happened to have for some reason. I swear I did not buy this. It's all rusted and shit. I don't even know where I got it. After cutting the body where the torso meets the belt, I shoved some toothpick and green stuff into the void to make it sturdy, taking a second to fill the new gap and sculpting in the quick detail that was lost in the process. I wanted the Marine to look like it was charging forward, so I picked out the most symmetric power claws to use for the pose. However, just like with the Brothers Penitent Marine, the upper arm doesn't match up remotely. However, we can once again get away with a little sly devilishness by hiding the discrepancy with those big, beautiful pauldrons. In this case, the Crimson Scythes share a chapter symbol with the size of the Emperor. No, not the size of the Emperor, the Scythes of the Emperor. Both for obvious reasons, in that the size of the Emperor decals and STLs are quite easy to obtain for your own modeling needs. Seriously, I see them around all over the place. While this was a good dashing forward pose for the mini, I felt like it was lacking a little something, so I broke out an old jump pack. Not only does this make the Marine more effective in his horde clearing duties, but I felt like it gave the pose a bit more momentum and energy by leaning the Marine forward a little more. Plus, as previously stated, I was looking to just add more variety to the loadouts featured in the video, and we hadn't had a jump pack Marine yet, so here we are. Let's talk some lore while I lay down the paint, since there's kind of a lot of it on accident. Now, initially I didn't want to connect the Crimson Scythes to the size of the Emperor, just because they both have the word Scythe in their name. After all, not every guy at high school with the last name Rodriguez are related to each other. You guys know who you are. I'm sorry. Anyways, the more I thought about it, the more I actually worked out a backstory that I liked that involved that connection, so I decided to just roll with it. In my new background for the Crimson Scythes, the Crimson Scythes were not present during the initial formation of the Astartes Praeses, being a later addition to the ranks on the grounds of merit. The Crimson Scythes are a direct descendant of the Scythes of the Emperor, who themselves were formed by the last survivors of the Ultramarine secret Agita Company. During the infamous fall of Sotha, half of the Scythes of the Emperor's 8th Company were tasked with the safe evacuation of the planetary leaders and crucial cargo. When the Astartes had escorted their VIPs to a spaceport away from the front lines, they were to return and help the 8th Company repel the Tyrannid forces. The veteran sergeant leading the rescue effort, Nathaniel Ventarian, quickly told the escort to haul ass so they wouldn't miss out on all the fun, but the politicians dragged their feet. Like those escort missions where the NPC moves too slowly when you run, but too fast when you walk. Nathaniel's convoy was considerably delayed. By the time they had returned to the front lines, they had been gobbled up by the hungriest of hippos, and they were forced to flee Sotha. Nathaniel's convoy fled the planet, reuniting with the surviving remnants of their chapter. As the chapter assessed the damage and formulated a plan, Nathaniel's convoy expressed their frustrations to the chapter in an explosive Dumbledorian serenity. Not only had the chapter failed to protect their home world from the Great Devourer, but they had been denied the glory of even attempting the defense, being stuck on an escort mission for the pay-to-play players. Nathaniel's convoy left the broken chapter, heading straight for Holy Terra with an ace up their sleeve. When Nathaniel brought the news of the events on Sotha to Terra, he presented a written favor from one of the political lords who had conveniently lost their life during the invasion. While the signature and seal on the writ had been verified as genuine, the suspiciousness of how Nathaniel somehow acquired this writ and its simple existence was, as the kids say, conveniently sus. I'm venting, bros. Nevertheless, the writ was passed to the correct hands and Nathaniel was given domain over a successor chapter, one he christened the Crimson Scythes. Nathaniel immediately tasked his chapter with recruitment over a wide spread of sectors. With the small size of his chapter barely pushing 50 men, it took considerable time to find aspirants. They targeted planets with refugees of Tyranid attacks, promising them bloody revenge for losing their homes and family. With their manpower finally having potential, the Crimson Scythes began to amass an armory through two main methods: political bootlicking and looting, both leaving a very sour taste in Nathaniel's mouth. While this did eventually end up with the chapter receiving acquisitions from the Mechanicus, the bootlicking exacerbated Nathaniel's shaky relations with politicians already, being the sole reason they were in this position in the first place in his mind. As soon as their usefulness waned, Nathaniel cut all ties with politics, leaving the bad taste of nobility behind him completely. Another method they had used to bolster their forces was scavenging. The Crimson Scythes would shadow the engagements of larger chapters like the Imperial Fists or Blood Angels and wait for the fighting to lighten up a little bit. While the larger chapter was cleaning up, the Crimson Scythes were cleaning out, landing their ships and stealing abandoned war gear the other chapter hadn't had the chance to reclaim yet. The Crimson Scythes amassed their war gear at the expense of their reputation, their crimes against their brother chapters going unanswered despite the threats of retaliation. The Crimson Scythes are generally an abrasive chapter if that backstory didn't make it obvious enough. They don't really care about their rep to the wider Imperium. They don't even really care about their job as an Astartes Praeses, instead being almost entirely focused on fighting Tyranids. They've gained a reputation as lightning-fast responders, their quiet seething leading them to respond immediately when a threat arises. While relatively a young chapter, their losses are minimized by the excessive amount of pilfered war gear in their inventory, as there are no shortages of aspirants looking for revenge. As a bit of a flavor note, the Crimson Scythes will actually fight alongside their parent chapter in times of need, but the bad blood fostered between the Crimson Scythes and the Scythes of the Emperor leads to a complete lack of cooperation from the Crimson Scythes. To Nathaniel and his men, the destruction of the Tyranids is the only thing that those two chapters can see eye to eye on. I initially started this chapter by trying to distance the relation to the Scythes of the Emperor, but by embracing it, I think I ended up with something more interesting than I initially mapped out. I like the idea that the chapter is hell-bent on revenge against the Nids at the cost of everything else, rubbing everyone that could be a potential ally the wrong way. Revenge is their motivation and goal, but how far can that get them in a system as flawed as the Imperium, you know? Not to mention completely abandoning their post at the Eye of Terror, a discrepancy the chapter has not yet answered for. As much as other chapters may focus on other stuff, I imagine they still stick to guarding the Cadian sector to some degree, so the idea of an Astartes Praeses chapter completely abandoning the sector just to fight Tyranids kind of fits with their motivations and adds a little bit of contrast, I guess. Overall, the idea could use a little refinement, obviously, but, you know, I'm still a fan. I like it. The Knights Unyielding are another of the Astartes Praeses existing almost entirely in name alone. Despite this, they have made one appearance in the book Dark Creed. In the book, the Battle of the Boros Gate was an attempt by the Word-Bearers to prepare the area for Abaddon's 13th God damn it. Anyways, the Word-Bearers came down on Boros Gate. Of course, the Imperial Guard and Imperial Navy were there to help defend, but funnily enough, the White Consuls and Iron Talons were also present in defense of the area. Also, the Grey Knights showed up, which is not actually a good thing, usually, but it was this time because the Necrons invited themselves to the party. The Knights Unyielding teamed up with their fellow Astartes Praeses to defend the Boros Gate. But before the battle, a captain of the Knights Unyielding's first company attends a war council. While most of the proper physical description is sadly not provided, the knight is described as highly ornamented with purity seals and fluttering oath papers. It's not much, but we do have something to work with. While I do have a couple of captain models I've been saving for, I've already utilized one of my Leviathan Stern Guards for his heavy bolter, so I'll poach the body since I really didn't feel like sculpting a tabard. This body has a drum mag for a heavy bolter hanging on his belt though, so first thing I'm going to remove is that. Before gluing it together, I drilled a bunch of holes in his stomach. I've really come to hate this cloth over the midsection trend GW is pushing towards, and if you've seen my Red Wing video, you'll know the modification I'm doing here. With a hole in the torso cut open, I fill my gaps with balled up aluminium, as you Brits say, wrongly. The foil gives me a solid base to lay green stuff on top of to sculpt a fabric-free midsection. The name Knights Unyielding invokes the image of a brave knight or a strong warrior of some kind, unwavering in the face of his enemies, strong on his mountain. I gave him an outstretched assault intercessor arm as if he was pointing his blade, as if he was issuing a challenge to someone. As always, I prioritize the angle of the arm before making it more stable by gap filling with green stuff. Pauldrons really do hide a lot of modeling sins. I can't understate their importance when it comes to Space Marines, or Chaos Marines, or, whatever. For the right arm, I wanted him to be carrying a Storm Shield, but there were two problems. One is that my Storm Shield bits are left-handed, and I couldn't find an arm with a good angle. So my solution was to graft his Storm Shield onto this communicator arm from the Intercessor kit. This was done by cleaving off the left hand molded onto the shield and cutting the arm at the wrist to turn the fist sideways. You can sort of tell that the whole forearm should have been rotated if you look at it closely, or if you know what the bit looks like, and yeah, you can totally do that, but I figured I'd be hiding it behind a shield anyways, so, fuck it. The Knights Unyielding's chapter heraldry is never listed, so for my interpretation, I'll have them sharing a symbol of crossed swords with chapters like the Emperor's Warbringers or the Guardians of the Covenant. With a name like Unyielding, I figured a symbol of a shield of sorts would also work to denote some level of resiliency, but I like the idea of Unyielding referring to the Space Marines' normal combat role as shock troops, like they're an offensive role, but there's no way to stop their offense, like armor in a fighting game or something, So the Knights Unyielding's identifying characteristics were their long, flowing purity seals. At least for the captain, it was, but hey, no reason why the rest of the chapter can't have them as well. For this, I'm doing something I've seen a lot but never done myself, and that's making my own purity seals. When people make long, flowing purity seals, they usually cut strips of tin or copper to use, but I didn't have any of that laying around. But you know what I do have way too much of laying around? That's right, Coke Zero cans. After all, Coke Zero is the only reason I'm even awake 90% of the time. After cutting the top and bottom off the can, I sanded the surfaces lightly to roughen it up, which will help when attaching and priming. Then, after washing and drying the newly acquired metal sheet, I cut very thin strips out, comparing it to a purity seal bit to get something approximately the same size. What I ended up doing was taking my beat up clippers and using it as a folding tool for the strips, bending them erratically back and forth, before using my fingers to pull down and smooth out some of the folds so it doesn't look like a little accordion strip. These were then attached to various spots on the model with superglue, taking care that every seal flows in the same direction of the wind. It's only my first try, but, I think these look pretty good, honestly. With a little blob of green stuff pressed in with a sculpting tool, these are what I think are pretty damn cool purity seals. I'll definitely be using this method down the line, although my strips will be slightly smaller to make sure the seal itself doesn't get too large. Maybe I'll also make a little tool or something to stamp the seals out with like a little skull design or something. I don't know, a little stamp would be cool. For this next section, it's going to be a little unscripted because honestly, I didn't really come up with a lot of concrete lore. It's more of a vibe, I guess. And I figured, you know, not even official chapters have everything fleshed out, so I figured it'd be okay. In my mind, the Knights Unyielding have never really disclosed who their gene sire is, although there are suspicions that they are probably related to the Imperial Fists. The fact that they are very secretive about that information, though, does kind of hint at some kind of secret history that they kind of want to keep under covers. While other chapters may deal with chaos incursions of any size, anywhere from a growing cult to something a little more established, the Knights Unyielding demand that they are only sent to the largest known force of chaos in the area. They feel it's a bit beneath them to deal with smaller targets when there are larger whales to hunt, you know. They're known for a very straightforward and heavy armor assault, usually leaning on melee, but there's a mix of melee and range. When it comes to coordinated efforts, however, the Knights Unyielding do see the bigger picture, and they'll work around with their allies to get the job done at the end of the day. Besides their general strategy to head where the fighting is the thickest and generally crush it under their boot, the Knights Unyielding are fairly secretive otherwise. I'm thinking like a mix between Black Templar and Dark Angels, you know, somewhere in there. But admittedly, that's kind of the extent of my homebrewing for the Knights Unyielding. There wasn't really a lot to work off of, and I kind of gave them a general vibe and a look, but otherwise, I couldn't really land on any kind of concrete lore that I actually liked. I think I'll settle for leaving the Knights Unyielding to the mercy of the community. I want to see what kind of backstory you guys could probably make for the Knights Unyielding. Because like I said, I was tinkering with it for a while, and I couldn't really come up with anything that really called to me, you know? So here's the equation, here's the solution, solve for X. The final name-only chapter of the Astartes Praeses, the Viper Legion boasts 2 bits of official lore to its name. The homeworld, where they originate, and a horror story with everyone's favorite inquisitorial lapdogs, the Minotaurs. The Viper Legion hail from the world of Aurelius, although it's unknown if they recruit there, base their operations there, both, neither. More notably is their involvement in the Bifrost incident. The planet Bifrost is most famously known for the 121st Imperial Guard Regiment, who were known participants in that one crusade. Funnily enough, as this series goes on, the distinction of participating in that war seems a little less impressive every time I mention it. Anyways, the story centers around a chaos insurgency where Bifrost Huskarls started making trouble in the neighborhood. The forces of chaos had managed to corrupt a few regiments of Huskarls, and the Viper Legion were sent in limited numbers to lead loyalist guard regiments in a planetary defense. Sadly, this is where things go tits up for Viper Legion because their reinforcements were the Minotaurs. While in the field, a member of the Viper Legion, Sergeant Augustine, made history when he glanced at the Minotaur's dreadnought and mistook it as a chaos-aligned demon engine. He opened fire on it, not knowing the target's identity. Hecaton Ikos, guardian of the Minotaur's flagship spacecraft, the Daedalus Crata. Hecaton, whether in the heat of battle or just possibly for shits and giggles, knowing the Minotaurs, immediately turned to the Viper Legionnaire and his guardsmen, slaughtering him and 37 guardsmen. A Leman Russ that was supporting the unit approached to try to stop the dreadnought, which was then torn open to expose the juicy, squishable guardsmen inside. Were it not for the chapter master of the Minotaurs, Astarion Moloch, who was watching the incident and ordered the dreadnought to stand down, it's a pretty safe bet to assume the rest of the guardsmen would have probably been slaughtered as well. Much like the Knights Unyielding, there is little to no information on the Viper Legion in general, so I wanted to keep with the theme of their name. Vipers are venomous snakes, and so I wanted to make my Viper Legionnaire in a knife-wielding pose with the blade coated in venom. This will tie into the lore I made for the chapter that I'll get into later, but for now I use this knife arm from the Infiltrators kit with the enlarged shoulder trimmed down so I can fit a regular pauldron on it. Before I attached the left arm, I decided to shave off the Aquila. I think a lot of Viper Legion's visual flair is going to come from the design of the paint job, so I wanted to maximize the space I had for freehanding a design on later. Since attaching the other arm from the Intercessor's kit was simple enough, I'll finish this section off talking about snakes. Vipers are snakes found on most major landmasses across the globe, with the exceptions mainly being isolated islands. They are venomous, which is different from poisonous. If you bite it, it's poisonous. If it bites you, it's venomous. See, I learned a thing or two from Boy Scouts. With such a widespread population across the planet, there are so many different species of vipers across a whole shade of rainbow colors, like a fucking gamer keyboard. I had originally eyed this picture, which is like a diagram of like a European common adder, but like I could only find a European adder like this with the blue stripe down it in this picture. No matter what I did or where I looked, I couldn't find one with a normal stripe like that. And I wanted to kind of base it off of a European adder, just because, you know, Games Workshop and they're British. But while looking for a better picture, I had another idea. During a lot of this project, I would put all the Marines out and just kind of look at them from a sky-high view. And I was trying to make sure that I would get a nice, diverse color variety across the whole board here, with like varying patterns and whatnot. And when I was sitting there looking at them, I noticed that I didn't really have anything in the yellow and green areas. Like I had the Reclaimers and the Subjugators kind of hitting a little bit of that yellow and a lot of that green, but otherwise there wasn't really anything, you know? I was pretty determined to go in the yellow-green area, but I hadn't settled on anything yet. And then one day I was playing Monster Hunter, right? You guys know me, right? My brain default exists in Monster Hunter. And I was like, you know what? Monster Hunter's got a fucking snake. There's a couple. And yeah, we got Najarala. Najarala is a 4th generation snake wyvern with a very distinct yellow-green coloration with like an orange almost into a dark orange, kind of a red at the end of his little fin shell bits. And I was like, you know what, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm always down for a Monster Hunter reference. I did also consider Tidal Najarala, which is its Arctic counterpart, to maybe match the Bifrost Incident snowy base kind of vibe, but in my mind, I just wanted something a little more temperate. Plus, I had been lamenting about this paint scheme for like 2 weeks at this point, so, you know, fuck it, Najarala. When it came to starting the paint scheme, the main thing I knew is that yellow was going to be a very large and predominant part of this mini's paint scheme, so before I did anything else, I went ahead and just knocked out all the yellow at once. I started from a white primer and slapped on yellow, which was then dry brushed with a bony tan. After the dry brushing, some of the spots were a little messy for my taste, so I took a little bit of contrast yellow, Bad Moon Yellow in particular, and I went around and cleaned up the dry brushing just to make sure the edges were highlighted. Alright, I know a lot just happened in that last cut, but bear with me here. So I was originally thinking of a half yellow, half green paint scheme, right? It's a slightly different kind of halving paint job because the right arm is also green, so in essence the only thing that's yellow is half of the torso, half of the helmet, and one leg, and then the other half of the mini and the arm on the other side is green. It'll make sense. But I was sitting there thinking one day and I was like, you know what? I really like the Rogue Trader camo patterns. I'd really like to try one of those. And when I went to go look at it, I noticed there was this grassy one that I really liked, and I probably should have done it in a 3rd color to have it contrast from the yellow and green, but I really wanted to just try and freehand some of those designs on. Lore-wise, Viper Legion is probably one of those chapters that is a little more willing to repaint their armor in camo schemes, and maybe this is just the camouflage that works best on their home planet. but the heraldry will always be yellow and green. Like those are their main, quote-unquote, main colors. So basically I started with the yellow, and I layered the green on top of it since it was the darker color, breaking out my nice and pointy brush to make all these little grass tuft patterns, making sure to coordinate the alternating colors between the yellow and the green. Like I said, a third color would have probably contrasted a little better across the armor, but I don't know, man. I really like Rogue Trader camo, and I feel like I wanted to do it, you know? I wanted to do the Rogue Trader camo, and here we are. After freehanding on all the camo and highlighting the green parts with a lime green, kind of a yellowy kind of dry brush, I went back to apply orange to a few parts of the miniature, mainly the pauldron band and one of the knee plates. I also hit up the bonding studs on the pauldron, which I think looked pretty cool actually. And then when everything was done, I watered down a brown wash and hit the entire mini with it. So here's the completed Viper Legionnaire, and I really like how this mini came out. Like, a lot. Like I said, I just really wanted to try something that evokes that old Rogue Trader camo. And in my mind, like, the colorful Viper aesthetic is always in line with, like, a jungle or something. So I wanted something a little more temperate, a little bright, a little vibrant, you know. And I'm really glad that my Monster Hunter brain rot set in just in time to pick this color scheme, because I'm telling you guys, I was fucking struggling. Lore-wise, I didn't come up for much with the Viper Legionnaire, just like the Knights Unyielding, but more of a vibe. In my brain, the Viper Legionnaires are camo, stealth expert, very much in the same strain as like Raven Guard. The Viper Legion comes from the world of Aurelius, which I've determined is like some kind of massive game planet with like these megafauna that like essentially rule the wilderness. As part of their Battle Brother initiation, they have to go out and kill a giant viper to truly become the Viper Legionnaire, you know. Not super original, but I like the idea. And maybe even people of higher ranks get to wear like ceremonial fang knives or something. One bit of extra flavor that doesn't really amount to anything, but I just like the idea of, obviously you see that the knife is poisoned, but I also really like the idea of them using special ammunition, just like the Death Watch, with each variety of shell loaded up with a different venom from some of their megafauna. Like maybe by default, the venom on their bolter rounds helps obscure them as they aerosolize, you know, as they're fired through the air or they explode on contact. But they can also swap out different kinds of venom-encased rounds to do other things like the Death Watch does. So on one hand, you can kind of run them like Raven Guard, but then you could also maybe run them as Death Watch, you know? Just something to give the little possibility of, you know, some different rules. I don't know. I like Death Watch. I want them to be included, you know? One last thing for Viper Legion. As I finished up the base and I was painting the base for him, it occurred to me to look at that camo sheet one more time. And I realized that the camo was for the Mantis Warriors. And the Viper Legion, right now, matches the fucking Mantis Warriors. So, yeah, I could have planned that a little better, I guess. Or is it a happy coincidence? I'm not sure, honestly. Alright guys, I hope you're all doing well so far. This is just another small intermission section to keep the video nice and organized. We've only got 5 more chapters to go, but I want to just thank you guys again to everybody who's watched up till now. The final 5 of the Astartes Praeses are completely unlisted in the Mythos Angelica Mortis, so all 5 of these are Lich's Lab complete originals. I put a monumental amount of effort into making sure they are interesting, but also could, you know, somewhat fit into the official lore canon vibe if you kind of squint your eyes, you know. Like it's that middle area where it's supposed to blend in, but some boundaries are pushed just a little bit, you know, just in the name of making something interesting for you guys. But yeah, we're almost at the end. Just hang in there.
Proper etiquette at tea time is one of the surest hallmarks of quality breeding, and the extent of one's attentiveness is quite often indicative of the depth of one's character. The ability of a person of fine stock to exhibit a rich quality of character is precisely what determines whether one is worthy to be called noble. And all of that can be seen in how one handles such a simple thing as a cup of tea.
The Knights of Gold are a chapter of certain eccentricities. While these Ultramarine successors are technically adherents to the Codex Astartes in terms of organization and operations, their armor markings and general symbology change from man to man. Above all else, though, the chapter is known for one predominant characteristic.
They're French.
Stinky pits and all, baby!
Yes, the Knights of Gold are vaguely themed after French nobility of the early Renaissance period, complete with the vanity, self-aggrandizement, and general shitheadedness that comes along with the blue blood. Hailing from the paradise world of Valensol, yes, I know, the Knights of Gold are purebred nobility who make the noble sacrifice of defending humanity as one of the God Emperor's angels. Each one of their accomplishments carefully recorded by their serfs and scribes. The Knights of Gold are ostentatious and gaudy, each knight's family heraldry and colors displayed upon fields of their massively crafted golden armor. In fact, their armory is some of the finest in the entire Imperium, due to each Astartes coming from a background of incomprehensible wealth and regional power, with individual knights sometimes wielding rare and powerful archaeotech as a status symbol. The Knights of Gold operate mostly in small patrolling forces around the Eye of Terror, each one usually consisting of a single company. Each one of these forces still consists of a small fleet of ships, as many officers choose to accompany the main battle barge in their personal ships. Their chapter master resides on Valensol, directing the forces from the comfort and luxury of the planet's many palaces. Command may be passed to his attendants if the chapter master is required to attend a social gathering, to which he reluctantly attends quite a few. His attendants make up the veterancy of the First Company, the First Company itself serving as honor guard and garrison of Valensol itself, which sees too many of the most decorated Astartes to stand around ceremoniously at luxurious events as glorified bodyguards. While many of the noble houses are eager for the honor of sending a child to serve as a Knight of Gold, the bloodlines of the noble houses are paramount to the survival of both their world and the chapter's future. Therefore, the chapter has decreed to ban the firstborn son of a house from recruitment, giving the chapter their nickname of Secondborn Sons. This leads to eager younger brothers now turned knights, accruing many honors and titles from both the Imperium and the upper nobility of their homeworld, every little deed being acknowledged for the glory of their family. In fact, the accumulation of these deeds and titles can become, for lack of a better phrase, cumbersomely ceremonial and hilariously impractical. You see, the Knights of Gold are complete slaves to their aggrandizing ceremonies, wasting hundreds and hundreds of man-hours over unimportant dick-measuring competitions. Due to this, they are known to operate with about 3 times the normal servants and scribes found in a standard chapter. Each knight has their own team of scribes and serfs that record every little title, award, and deed the knight has to their name, with many awards given for relatively small and mundane achievements. On the eve of a large battle, the knights gather on the front lines of the battlefield with their scribes, who begin to recite the complete list of a knight's titles and achievements. Veteran knights with a relatively large list of deeds may be there for hours before the assault actually begins, as their scribes tag in and out of reading the unending list of accolades. Both the failure to finish the recitation and rushing through the recitation is considered to be a grave offense to their master, so scribes must carefully pace themselves to finish at the appropriate time.
He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic so that no one had a chance to interrupt. It was really quite hypnotic.
Only after the recitations will the chapter mobilize into combat, which, yes, does include emergency operations. That means the Knights of Gold will carry out their recitations while a city is actively burning down or being spore-fucked by nids or something, a true testament to the vanity the chapter is known for. And yes, they will all receive a commendation in the closing ceremonies for technically being present for that fight, where they will be listed as a veteran of the conflict and happily move on to their next task. The blue-blooded second-born sons are therefore normally tasked with things that are not time-sensitive, a compromise that keeps the knight's ceremonies uninterrupted and civilians, well, alive, most of the time at least. Funnily enough, the Knights of Gold share an interesting relationship with the orcs in the Cadian sector due to this ritual. When the orcs of the area recognize the heraldry of the Knights of Gold, the local war boss and his crew will hilariously attend the ritual from a distance, listening to the various deeds of the knights in great detail. Funnily enough, the knights actually allow this, and even allow them to return to the front lines afterwards if they wish. Both parties greatly invested in the recitation of heroic deeds the chapter has accomplished before combat. To call this phenomena bonkers is putting it lightly, but if you guys are happy, then hey, go for it. For the base of this Knight of Gold, I'm going to be utilizing this running Assault Intercessor pose. I feel like it'll take good advantage to what I want to be the main conversion of the model, and that's an honest-to-God, farm-fresh, whole grain, no GMO Eviscerator. I have these Stormcast Eternal parts left over from an old conversion, and one bit I've been saving are these arms holding a two-handed sword. This makes for a pretty easy swap job here, cutting just under the hilt to leave me a room to attach an Eviscerator blade. The Eviscerator itself was pretty easy to make as well. I just stitched two chain swords together at a length approximately 2 chain swords long and fitted onto the handle bit. After making sure the bottom was flat, I pinned it to the handle where the old blade was mounted to ensure I couldn't accidentally break it off. I also happened to find this little bit sitting on my desk. I mounted it to the front of the Eviscerator to act as a handguard, although I couldn't tell you where it came from. With the arms sorted out, I turned to the Pauldrons. The Knights of Gold share the chapter heraldry of the Charnel Guard, both for the French fleur-de-lis style cross, and because the Charnel Guard are just really fucking cool. I used 2 matching Pauldrons here simply because I like the idea of symmetry, but given the progression of the lore I've made for the chapter, I would probably argue that one Pauldron would be used to display their house heraldry or personal colors, and then the other one is chapter colors. You'll see later that the dress code for the Knights of Gold is very liberal. Before attaching these Pauldrons though, I wanted to put on a little green stuff here and make a fur collar, because I literally cannot fucking help myself. Like, when it comes to armor, just putting fur on that armor, done, sold me, I'm in. The fur was made with a little log of green stuff placed around the collar, and then just pinched up with my old clippers. This is really fast fur, and I've been meaning to practice with a proper fur sculpting method down the line, but for now, this makes it nice and fluffy. I like fluffy fur. A note that this guy here is simply a sergeant, but I imagine as the ranks of the knights get higher and higher, they get more eye-destroyingly gaudier and flamboyant. In fact, just thinking about the mere thought of the chapter master fills me with this ostentatious dread. Like the scribes that have to read that guy's list. Yeah, I feel for you guys. Also, as the final touch, I added on some purity seals with the same method I used for the Knights Unyielding. I didn't go as heavy on them as the Knights Unyielding though. I felt like they'd be kind of stepping on their toes design-wise. Plus, he's just a sergeant. Let's say he's new. The uniform for the Knights of Gold is not a very strict one, as their main identifiable feature is the luxurious gold of the armor. As you can see here, I'm dry brushing some silver onto the gold for highlights, like just as a baseline kind of thing, but from there, your personal Knight of Gold can vary tremendously. The only main qualifications for the Knights of Gold uniform are this. Number 1, gold armor. I felt like that's, pretty straightforward. And number 2, the chapter heraldry on the left shoulder. The left pauldron must have a left field of green, the right field of purple, and banded with black. And yeah, that's it. That's the entire uniform. Go nuts. I feel like that not only does it really suit the individual noble house flavor that the chapter has, but it also might give you some leeway for chapter organization, or you just want to do cool freehands. Like if you're a Bretonnian player, I mean, obviously this chapter is for you. It's not even transparent. This is just gold Bretonnians, really. Like the very core of the idea is Mardi Gras Marines. You got your gold, your green, your purple, a little bit of black. But yeah, otherwise just do what you want, I wanted my Marine to be really eccentric, I guess. So I ended up coloring random panels and spots on the Marine with random variants of color. And most notably, you can see I tried to do a diamond pattern on the left leg and the Eviscerator itself. We're not going to talk about how the Eviscerator hilariously goes out of camera. Yeah, it's kind of a nightmare to put in the box. But you can see I also have the helmet, and I put little dots on each side of the helmet to denote like a little crown of beads, For those who don't know, down in Louisiana with the big Mardi Gras culture, whenever they have big parades, they'll throw out like beads mainly for people to collect, but they also throw random stuff. I had a friend who got hit in the face with a hot dog. That was funny. But they'll like launch t-shirts and shit. It's it's not bad. Not bad for a little day out. Get plastered at the parade with your friends. Whatever. Overall, I really like the Knights of Gold. You could probably tell by the amount of lore I had cemented for them. As someone with a great respect for Bretonnian players who go through the effort of making all their models individualized, I wanted to get that energy out in there into my project, So if you've got like some super customized, not super legal loadout hero Marines laying around, but you're not really settled on a paint scheme, consider joining the Knights of Gold so you can channel that Bretonnian Harlequin energy.
You don't seem to want to accept the fact that you're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best. With guns, with knives, with his bare hands. A man who's been trained to ignore pain, ignore weather, to live off the land, to kill, period. Win by attrition. Well, Rambo was the best.
To start this section off, I have to delve into a little bit of Lich lore. I spent the majority of my childhood growing up in Virginia, right along the coast actually. During history class over the years, we learned a lot of the local Native American tribe, the Powhatan. The Powhatan people were a part of the Algonquin tribes, one of the largest language groups in northeastern America at the time, and they were the tribe that lived in eastern Virginia when the English colonists established Jamestown in 1607. To those unfamiliar with them, they were the tribe that Pocahontas was from, who famously married John Rolfe in what Disney would have you believe was a happily ever after marriage, but had a lot of drama to say the least. Anyways, to me, the early history of America and the Englishmen's interactions with the Native American tribes have always been very prevalent in my brain. While many people hear about this stuff in history books, I lived like, no joke, 30 minutes from Jamestown, commonly regarded as the birthplace of this entire country, and have known many people in the area with Native American ancestry. I've had many a field trip to various museums and places of history surrounding Native American history, and I credit a lot of my interactions with those people with how I interact with nature and animals within it. Warhammer 40,000 was built upon the shoulders of white people, although calling the British people is a bit of a stretch.
Stop right there, you
you tea-sucking son of a bitch!
But in general, there is little to no representation for any of the Native American tribes. Now, I'm really not one to get bent out of shape about representation in media. After all, I don't really give a shit if anybody represents the Filipinos. But with so many factions drawing from real-life aesthetics and seeing my opportunity to bring a little bit of that history to the forefront, I wanted to use this chance to combine some respect for those people and a little bit of nostalgia for me in the form of the Tomahawks. The Tomahawks are a non-codex compliant successor of dubious origin. Some people suspect White Scars, but there's evidence to lead that they are Raven Guard successors as well. The Tomahawks are people of the land with a strong sense of pragmatism and resourcefulness. They hail from the feral world of Vinland, although in their native tongue the planet is known as Chesapeake, a world of coastal plains and rolling mountains. The native people of Vinland are divided into countless tribes, with each one sending their most capable warriors and hunters to join the ranks of the Tomahawks. While the Tomahawks have sovereignty over the planet's tribes, they frequently bump heads with the planet's imperial influence, leading to a strained relationship and an overall isolation with the larger Imperium and their role as the Astartes Praeses. While many accuse them of shirking their duties, the Tomahawks are more preoccupied fighting a shadow war against an unknown invader to their planet, causing them to prioritize the planet's safety over patrolling the Eye of Terror. While their role as Wardens of the Eye of Terror may see to their chapter sailing the stars on occasion, the Tomahawks are children of nature, utilizing their harmony with the geography of their homeworld to be masters of stealth, tracking, disguise, and ambush. Due to the combat doctrine and a faithful intervention by the Dark Hunters, the sons of the Khan who favor stealth over speed, the two chapters enjoy an extremely strong bond of brotherhood. While they operate in a similar fashion, the Tomahawks have been noted to excel in a more defensive role, where the Dark Hunters favor a more aggressive approach. The Dark Hunters have also imbued the spirit of the Khan into the Tomahawks, who now frequently use bikes in open warfare, utilizing their speed when stealth is not an option anymore. Their interactions have seen the two chapters becoming almost blood brothers, frequently sparring against one another to hone their skills and inviting each one to another's homeworlds for great hunting tournaments. Truly a testament of making friends through your hobby. For the Marine, I started from a body that had the knee flanges, gorget, and aquila all trimmed off. No real reason, just mixing it up. The first thing I did was immediately mix some epoxy putty, laying it on a plastic bag to flatten it out. This putty here is a mixture of milliput and green stuff, which I've been using a lot lately. When researching the clothing that the Algonquin tribes used back then, you'll find that this waist wrap is a very common sight, although for some reason I couldn't find exactly what that wrap was called or how it was wrapped. Instead, I did my best to mimic its appearance from the angles I could see it from, cutting the angular design on the lower end of the wrap before attaching it to the model. What I had ended up doing was attaching the left half first, then the right half, then finally a flap over the front end. I also took a second to work out a matching trim above the belt line, so it looks like the garment was actually being held up by a belt, instead of just like plastered on, you know. I wanted this Marine to be holding his namesake, so I found a two-headed power axe from, I think, the Vanguard veteran kit, and chopped off the rear-facing axe blade. This was affixed to a spare arm I had from cutting up another model. The left arm was a knife-wielding arm from the Assault Intercessors kit, which was given the pose it and hide the sins with a pauldron kind of treatment. Note that the heraldry on the pauldron matches the Executioners, mostly because the axes are single-edged axes, but also the Executioners are fucking badass. Also, with some spare putty, I made these little feathers to mount on the back of the helmet. I didn't bother texturing them since it'd take longer to do both sides for something I can fake with paints. Although for something like a captain or a lieutenant, I would actually go through and sculpt proper feathers. A lot of the character of the Marine will be added in the final paint job, so for the final physical modification, I added a fur pelt to the right pauldron. One of the sadly few ways the Native Americans interacted with early colonists was through the fur trade. Well, until the French showed up, but leathers and furs were a cornerstone of their clothing. We've got plenty of leather on the Mini, so I made a little fur on the shoulder as well. In retrospect, I forgot to put some kind of like rope holding it up or a nail affixing it to the shoulder, but hey, you know what they say. It's pretty easy to assume that Native American clothing of the time would consist of a lot of browns and tans and furs, which admittedly, yeah, it does, but the Powhatan tribes were known to employ a lot of war paint consisting of black, white, and reds. Those aren't the only colors, those are just the most prevalent. When it came to painting my Marine, I used a very neutral tan for the armor, which would allow me to use a slightly darker tan for the furs and the leather waist wrap. Then for the holster and the knife sheath, I used an even darker brown to just kind of help differentiate that they are different materials. The Algonquin traditional war paint uses a lot of black, white, and red in mostly geometric designs, very vivid and in your face. Well, I guess on your face in this example, but I also decided to extend the war paint designs onto the pauldron with the chapter heraldry, the top half being red and the lower half being the same tan as the rest of the armor, but the fields being divided by a white and black line. As for the face paint itself, there was an image that I had drawn some inspiration from, but there's only so much war paint you can fit onto a really small helmet, so I just tried to cram as much as I could on there. And finally, for the bare-chested area, I decided to place a hand symbol right on the chest. There are many reoccurring symbols that show up a lot in the war paint of the Algonquin tribes, and this hand in particular is a symbol used to denote success in hand-to-hand combat. And I don't know, I just thought the hand looked really cool. The Tomahawks are actually a chapter I've been looking to make for quite a long time now. I'd say out of the 5 original chapters, this is probably the one I was most eager to work on, and I would be open to the idea of fleshing these more out down the line. Like I said, with the Brothers Penitent, I'm no expert in the field that I am currently covering, in this case Native American history, so if any certified Native Americans want to come by and try to give a little more insight or correct something here, and please let me know. I'm always up for learning more about the early history of America. In fact, I did try to reach out to some people. I also tried to reach out to the Paw Monkey tribe. They never got back to me. They're probably like, man, who the fuck this nobody YouTuber? What's a Warhammer 40k? Get the fuck out of here. But as I said in that other section as well, if there are any kind of corrections, I will be listing them in the sticky comment. That's it. And with the Tomahawks done, let's move on to the next one. The Ironguard are a lab original chapter that I made slightly differently from the other chapters. I have this PDF with a bunch of charts to generate a Space Marine chapter with dice rolls. It's very similar to the old tables found on 1D4chan, but I couldn't source where this particular PDF came from. I just picked it up somewhere. Regardless, the Ironguard were a chapter I generated mostly with these tables, with a few modifications. Hell, the only thing I really did was pick the names and some finer details on things, so let me show you what the dice gods made. The Ironguard are Iron Hand successors hailing from the oceanic world of Locus, although this was not originally the case. The Ironguard were originally founded on the mining world of Mythos 3, but the awakening of a Necron dynasty underneath saw to their planet becoming overrun by the soulless automations. Despite this great shame, the Ironguard take their duties as member of the Astartes Praeses very seriously, only breaking away from their duties under the most dire circumstances. The Ironguard suffer from a mutation in their osmodula, although sadly not one as cool as the Black Dragons. Their mutated osmodula sees to the bones of the Ironguard to grow rough and jagged. causing the Astartes to move in a ratcheting fashion. The silence around them filled by this unnerving aura of popping and cracking as they walk forward. While this does make the faceless Angels of Death slightly more unnerving when they deploy onto a battlefield, it does have the benefit of allowing some of the Marines to lock portions of their body into position, allowing them to brace themselves against very heavy attacks without even flinching. With their robotic mannerisms and superhuman resiliency, the Ironguard certainly boast a very intimidating aura, but interacting them will immediately reveal their warm and friendly personalities, making for unusually charismatic and sympathetic Astartes compared to their brother chapters. The Ironguard are a Codex-compliant chapter, although they are known to utilize a few vintage pieces of equipment. As their parent chapter is, the Ironguard are in close relations with the Cult Mechanicus. After an extended incursion against the Chaos Warband using ancient weaponry from the days of the Horus Heresy, the Ironguard have begun their own private pursuits to revive these pieces of war gear, most notably having started the production of modern-day breaching shield prototypes. These are currently being field tested for performance tweaks, but initial testing seemed promising, with Ironguard veterancy quickly searching for older archaeotech to update and utilize. While I feel like this gives them a bit of flavor, it's a pretty transparent lore excuse to just use Horus Heresy models. When it came to converting this Marine, I really wanted a breaching shield. Breaching shields are one of those things that I am mad are not in standard Warhammer anymore, or at least like finessable with some rules, but I said fuck it, I wanted a shield. So I took this arm bit from a Infiltrator, which is one of their bolt carbines, and I noticed that if you cut off the front handle to one of those Infiltrator bolt carbines, it's pretty damn close to a normal bolter, you know? As much as it pains me to admit how much mileage I'm getting out of this Infiltrator kit, I have to admit, it's nice. Thanks, Fordo. For the other arm, I had this leftover Stormcast Eternal arm, their left arm that holds the shield. While it's pretty reasonable to be able to use Stormcast arms on a Primaris Marine, and it looks, you know, fairly okay, the majority of this piece is going to be hidden by the shield anyways, so I figured, you know, if I've got a bit designed to hold a shield, and I'm making a mini with a shield, I may as well just use the shield arm, you know? Speaking of, the shield was scratch built from styrene. I used this little post-it note to kind of mock up something appropriate in terms of size and shape, then transferred onto a sheet of styrene. Whenever the shape itself was cut out, I attached an even thinner piece of styrene on top of it to give it a little bit more of a reinforced thickness look, and used my knife to trim out the shape to match out the outline that I had previously scribbled on. I reinforced the corners of the shield with these little wire jewelry making accessory pieces. I don't remember where the bag went, but you can get them from Walmart. It's like $2. I also used these little glass seed beads that I had from some project a million years ago as the camera on top of the breaching shield. While some shields do feature an eye slot for people to look through, you'll notice, especially for Marines, that they have a small camera at the top that's linked up to their armor, so they can see what's on the other side without having to have that slot. With the front of the shield done, I glued some accessories to the inside of the shield and fashioned a combination arm strap / handle that can slot over the arm and allow the Marine to hold it. And before we get into the painting, let me mention that I wanted a chainmail tabard for this guy, and I did add one before the painting step, but this file particular got corrupted, so blame whichever chaos god you want for that. For the Ironguard, I was going into the painting step with next to no plan. All I knew is that I wanted the majority of the model to be silver. After consulting with the elders and using this website that generates random color schemes, I ended up settling on a really nice blue-green accented with a slightly pale orange. I mixed that blue-green in some sort of ratio that I wrote down and then lost, but essentially I just started with a little flat blue and added flat green to it until there was more green than blue. So yeah, it probably would have been better off to start green than blue. But hey, I was just mixing colors, so, you know. Actually looking at the final color I ended up settling on, it's pretty close to Incubi Darkness, so you might be able to get something close mixing that and blue, but, you know, I can't say for certain. Sorry for losing that ratio, my desktop is a little bit of a mess right now. This was all highlighted with that same color with just a little bit of white added in, and then a little more white for the gorget area, mainly. I wanted to add some color to the front of the breaching shield, so I used some masking tape and quartered the front of the shield. I considered getting ultra fancy and doing some checkers and whatnot, but yeah, after working on this project for about 3 months, I didn't really feel like putting in the effort there, so I just did a very basic quartering with one of those quarters halved. One thing I will say is that my orange paint is really transparent, so for the initial layers of these orange sections, I mixed in some light gray to help get some coverage, and then I applied that more transparent orange over it. Pretty much the same trick I use with my yellow, just orange. After painting some dark gray onto joints and bolter and pouches and whatnot, gave them a dry brush of gray, and I washed the entire mini with that nice mix of brown and black. Oh, reliable. If I had to boil any chapter down to Jesus take the wheel, it'd probably be this one, considering that I left 90% of its identity down to the whim of the dice. But ultimately, I think I settled on something I do enjoy. I know I'm using a Primaris Marine for most of these conversions out of simple availability, but I feel like this chapter would be a nice way to have a lore explanation for all those like Horus Heresy Marine conversions, you know? Like, these guys would not hesitate to use, you know, Mark II, Mark III, you know, Mark literally anything armor, you know, in their pursuit to find the one that works well. Also, the little lore bit about them being really friendly, I feel like that really helps differentiate them from the Necrons that took their homeworld, because at a glance, they're both kind of soulless and robotic, but whenever you get up to one of these Marines, they're really cheerful, really friendly, always glad to help, very Salamanders-y in their approach, very charismatic, but you don't approach a Necron, because if you're lucky, they'll shoot you, if you're unlucky, they'll wear you, you know? But yeah, I like the Ironguard.
Just meet me at my porch at midnight. Oh, and meanwhile, whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
The Vigilators are the next lab original chapter to fill the roster. The Vigilators are one of the oldest members of the Astartes Praeses, having guarded the Eye of Terror for a couple of centuries before the Mythos Angelica Mortis was officially ratified. The Vigilators do not follow the tenets of the Codex Astartes strictly, yet keep the inner machinations of their chapter on a need-to-know basis. They are also suspected to be successors of the Ravenguard Legion, although nothing concrete can be confirmed. The Vigilators are known to other chapters as inquisitive, yet reserved, their watchful eye seemingly able to pierce a veil of the warp and see the horrors of darkness others have no awareness of.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
They are known to operate for days on end, with the average battle brother commonly putting in averages of about a week straight. While some are impressed with the Vigilators' resiliency, this is actually due to a combination of gene seed mutations working in tandem within two different gene seed organs. The catalepsian node implanted into the brain allows a Space Marine to selectively cycle parts of their brain into periods of inactivity, essentially mimicking the effects of rest. This allows a regular Astartes to delay needing that rest for periods much longer than a normal human, although the achievement of longest known period of combat duty without rest lies with the Crimson Fists. The Fists are famously known for having a kill team stay awake for nearly 2 weeks straight, And while it is suspected that some of the upper echelon of the Vigilators have stayed awake for much longer, the Vigilators have stayed silent on the matter as to avoid the public eye. The second gene seed mutation the Vigilators suffer from is another organ resting near the brain, the Susan's membrane? This organ allows a Space Marine to enter a state of suspended animation for extended periods of time, allowing an injured Marine to receive medical assistance months after an injury if needed. The longest known hibernation of this nature was an Astartes of the Dark Angels, who sat in a coma for 567 years. That dude was the Eeper. The combination of the Vigilators' gene seed mutations are the cornerstones to both their achievements and to their darkest secret. See, behind closed doors, the Vigilators have lost control over these gene seed organs, which now function automatically instead of electing to use their functions. While it's true that the Crimson Fists have had some of their guys stay awake for 2 weeks, the Vigilators constantly drift in and out of short periods of sleep for months. Since the Vigilators are in a state of half rest for such long periods of time, this leaves them as perfect candidates as wardens for the forces around the Eye of Terror. However, this half rest is a bane as much as a boon, with many of their Astartes suffering from extreme sleep deprivation for being unable to sleep. While imperceptible in battle to the common man, chapters of veterancy see the Vigilators as sluggish in combat, leading the chapter to favor ranged weaponry to compensate for any kind of deficiency in melee combat. Countless hours of hovering on the edge of sleep also sees the chapter plagued with hallucinations after long bouts of service, which leads to the chapter apothecaries having to intervene. The apothecaries of the Vigilators collaborate closely with chapter serfs to adorn their Astartes with candles. These are worn on the power pack or special pauldrons made to accommodate for them, and are used to tell how long an Astartes has been awake. As the Vigilators stand for hours and days on end, other battle brothers can look to the candles of their allies to ensure they are still fit for duty. Those who are nearing the end of their wicks, or generally just tripping nuts at a glance, must return to the chapter's apothecaries for a candle replacement and medical examination. The Vigilators hail from the world of Somnus, a rainy cemetery world where a peculiar blue herb is found growing from the graves of dead saints. This herb is named Somnus Root, known for being able to put a regular man in a coma for years with the slightest dose. However, the apothecaries of the chapter are able to make sleeping medication with it strong enough to overpower an Astartes' natural poison resistance. This is given to Astartes who have been awake for too long, the tincture allowing a battle brother to get enough rest for a day or two and return to duty and not, trip nuts while on the clock. However, as dependent on Somnus Root as the chapter is, the root is becoming harder and harder to find, only being located on their homeworld. While most of the chapter take up long-term sentry positions in strategic locations, the head apothecary has taken the second company on a long-range search, in a desperate attempt to find something that can replace Somnus Root. To make matters worse, there is a growing population of Astartes in the 5th Company, foregoing sleep entirely, their captain claiming the sleep-deprived hallucinations to be a form of communion with the God Emperor. With the 2nd Company's search being unfruitful, the Eye of Terror looming over their shoulders, and the threat of some kind of implosion or insurrection by the 5th Company, things are looking quite dire for the Vigilators. For the Vigilator conversion, I kept it pretty simple overall, opting for a neutral standing pose holding a melta rifle I salvaged from an older model that was all sorts of fucked up. Not only did I want to utilize a pose holding a firearm, but we hadn't had a melta weapon on the list yet, so why not, I much prefer these old style weapon arms with the one open hand, as it just makes painting and converting a lot easier. Plus, this means you don't have a hand molded onto the front grip of a weapon, so when you shave it off when you do a conversion, you're not losing detail. I feel like we took a step back somewhere, The main part of the conversion of the Vigilators lies in the candles, but first we need to modify the pauldrons to have a lip, which will hold the candles in place. Using this random pauldron, I cut off the bottom edge of the trim, scraping and sanding it smooth for the next step. I placed a dot of gel superglue on the pauldron and attached this piece of square plastic hard dowel that I had bent into a U shape. I don't remember the actual size, but it's probably on screen there. With the glue cured in the middle, I used a toothpick to ensure glue gets to the undersides of the banding as well, securing the entire thing once again with some more glue where they meet and giving it a little bit of sanding for refinement. With a nice little shoulder shelf installed, we start making the candles with styrene rods. I use these 1.6mm rods, but you can also use other sizes or even toothpicks, anything cylindrical really. It's important to know which candles you want lit and which ones have exposed wick ahead of time, so you can drill a hole into the ones with they wick out. This will allow an easier installation of the candle wick later, but either way, you cut your candles to length before attaching them to the pauldron. Now we break out a little green stuff to make the details. This is not my method. In fact, I referenced a tutorial by Last Light Miniatures, so this is my first time personally doing it. Using a mixture that's a little more yellow than blue to make a softer putty, I began to model the dripping wax of the candles. This is a pretty free-form method, but from first-hand experience, I have a few pointers. First, try not to poke the undersides of the drips more than you need, because it'll make a little flat area that looks a little unnatural. And secondly, adding a few layers of wax can help a flat portion look a little more interesting. When the bottom layers are done, I added a bit to the tops of the candles, with candle wicks being pressed into the holes we drilled earlier with some very thin wire and super glue. Finally, with a very small teardrop of putty, I model the flames on top of the candles with a pinch, push, and a swish. Don't ask me how to define those, just make the fire look a little wispy. When it came to painting the Vigilator, I just knew I wanted some shade of purple. For this, I ended up working from an eggplant purple. It turns out eggplant purple is a lot easier to mix than I thought. You just take some purple and add in a little bit of brown and like a small dot of black, and you get like this really nice, deep, rich purple. From there, I just dry brushed on a neutral purple and then like a little lighter purple for the very tips. You know, three color dry brushing, nothing special there. I wanted to do a deep navy blue for the helmet and the pauldrons, and I feel like my highlights ended up a little too blue, and I was hoping the wash step would kind of knock them back down. It didn't on a first wash, but when I did a second wash, it turned out a little better. That second wash was done after the entire mini was washed once though. Like, I did one wash and then I went back specifically for the blue areas. I wasn't quite sure what color I wanted my candles to be, and I feel like white would also work well, but as a, not really an experiment, I guess, just to mix things up, I tried going with red candles. Like if you look at like Sons of the Phoenix, they have red candles and it looks really good there. So I figured, you know what, what's the harm? And I think after the wash, they turned out okay. I think it's just me personally being a little more biased to the neutrality of white candles. But I thought red would match the purity seals as well. And yeah, I think it worked out. The final steps for painting the mini were the candle flames and the various bits of scripture and scribble all over the armor. I feel like having some writing on the mini gives it a little more, like, not really spooky, but unnerving, I guess, uncomfortable. Also, a special note, the chapter's heraldry is the eye symbol on their helmet. You can see that the lenses of the helmet have not been colored in, and instead the third eye has been painted on the head of the mini. I feel like that does a little more to kind of differentiate them at a glance, and kind of drive home the sleep dream hallucination aspect the chapter has. Overall, I really like the Vigilators. Lore-wise, they're solid. Paint-wise, I really like them as well. If there's one thing I would change about this mini, I would put him in a robe. Like a very Dark Angels kind of robe. Like, I feel like a black robe over this armor would look really fucking cool. But like, maybe that's for veterans, elites, you know, kind of thing, just to give them a little something to differentiate them at a glance. When it comes to their force organization or codex markings, I hadn't really decided between Ultramarines or Imperial Fists, like for paint schemes, but I think the Imperial Fist would match them a little more. Like, they're Raven Guard successors in terms of like suspected gene seed and origin, but mechanically, definitely Fists or Raven Guard. I'm a little more partial to Raven Guard fluff-wise, but if you just want like a solid gun line, then maybe the Fist rules might be more accommodating. But yeah, on to the next one.
No, most hearts couldn't withstand this voltage. But I'm fairly certain your heart...
What was noise?
The sound of progress, my friend. Perfect. Kill me later.
Alright guys, the last section here is for a chapter I'm calling the Khimaera Legion, and this section is going to be mostly unscripted because I've been working on this project for way too long, and I'm kind of ready to move on, you know? During the early days of the Horus Heresy, the allegiances of some Astartes were pretty on the fence, with some not sure if they want to turn traitor, others staying loyal, you know, and for the most part, legions either went one way or the other. However, during this schism, there was actually a large amount of Marines that chose to abandon their legions, later becoming known as Black Shields. These Black Shields mostly operated on their own, whether it was to carry out their own missions or even just for their own personal gain. In fact, if you've seen my video on the Shattered Legions, we covered the Ashen Claws, who are a pretty good example of renegade Black Shields. They were sent to die by their Primarch, Corvus Corax, and later became disillusioned with the whole conquest and crusade of the galaxy, especially in the name of some guy who's just being a complete cunt, you know. So they ended up taking refuge in a far-off star system and essentially living as pirates, raiders, and local tyrants. That being said, not every Black Shield falls to their baser instincts of loot, pillage, and steal, as many of them continue the Great Crusade by themselves, or sought to fight against either the Loyalists or the Heretics in their own smaller warbands. The Khimaera Legion is a chapter consisting entirely of Black Shields from the Horus Heresy. When Rabute Guilliman charged Khal with the creation of the Primaris Marines, many Marines were drafted from every Loyalist Legion to one day wake up and fight the enemies of humanity once more. A chapter's worth of Black Shields had finally been accumulated, and they were to be interned with the rest of the draftees to become Primaris Marines in the future. However, unbeknownst to Khal, one of the little engine seer fabricator guys underneath him had taken all these Black Shields and set them aside for his own malicious experiment. While in cryostasis, they began to poke and prod at the Black Shield's DNA, eventually grafting Xeno DNA straight into the Marines. Whether or not they were agents of the Dark Mechanicus or innocently seeing what would happen with a childlike sense of wonder is unknown at the end of the day. But what is known is the fate of the Black Shields when they were awoken. When they stumbled out of cryostasis, the 1,000 Marines were dubbed Khimaera Legion, alluding to the fact that many of these Marines had come from various different legions and backgrounds. However, it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference, as well as many of these Marines had now woken up with some random alien DNA inside of them, be it Selkin, Rakgul, Bargizi, Gene Stealer, just an entire smorgasbord of DNA slammed into these dudes' bones. The early records of the Legion's history were filled with heroic deeds and conquests within the Cadian sector, yet their erratic behavior eventually caught the eye of the Inquisition. Eventually, they were discovered to be harboring mutated Astartes, their bodies horribly broken and misshapen, but their spirits still burning with the Emperor's fury. Protests from the chapter apothecaries were ignored, and the chapter was sentenced to death, forcing the Khimaera Legion to flee into the Eye for refuge. There, the warp energies exacerbated their mutations, the majority of the chapter now sporting growths reflecting their new Xeno DNA. Despite this, the chapter leadership has seen the indomitable spirit of their warped Black Shield brothers, and allows them to keep fighting as long as their humanity keeps control over their new twisted forms. The sole flagship of the Khimaera Legion's forces now sit in the Eye of Terror, as apothecaries tend to flesh, and chaplains tend to the spirit. The chapter master laments the situation his brothers have found themselves in, awakened to defend the Imperium, yet outcast from that home, yet is determined to allow his chapter to die in holy combat and attain the Emperor's forgiveness. So if it wasn't obvious enough, this is the obscure Xeno Space Marine Kitbash chapter. I wasn't exactly trying to be discreet about it. I wasn't really sure what kind of stuff I would slap onto the Marine, but I did know that I wanted him to be somewhat falling apart, almost like a zombie. So to do this, I cut out a chunk of the torso and part of the face. The torso had some green stuff shoved in there to sculpt a set of ribs that you could see through the armor, and the head was hollowed out enough to insert part of this skull into the hole. I tried sculpting a skull, but it just ended up really weird, so I just said fuck it and jammed a skull in there. I found some Tyranid parts laying around in one of my boxes, and while not necessarily having a Gene Stealer Tyranid mutation, I understand that using those bits on the Mini is going to give that impression. So for a while I was like, maybe I can kind of do something to it, and then I thought, you know what, fuck it. I've been doing this for 3 months. Fuck it. Plus, it kind of just ended up really cool to me in general. I took these Tyranid arms and replaced the exhausts on the back of the power pack and mounted them instead. I realize it's the forbidden comparison, but these guys really do look like infested Marines from StarCraft, and I'm okay with that. I like StarCraft. From here, I just worked on texturing the miniature in particular, not only adding these little green stuff balls all over the place, but using a combination of super glue on top of some Mod Podge. You can get like some really nasty, bubbly, chaosy looking flesh texture. And I used that strategically around the model to give it a little bit of texture. And speaking of, I also took some watered down Typhus Corrosion and sprinkled that all over the armor as well. If you've seen the Grey Death mini that I made for my Abyssal Crusade video, it's pretty much the exact same thing. I will work on learning other methods of texturing armor, but today is not that day. While I had initially started painting the legs of the miniature black, something about it just didn't feel right. So I eventually settled on doing a half scheme, halved blue and white, but I did most of the painting with only washes. I felt like this would be a good way to really have all that texture stand out. And I'm really glad I did, honestly, because at a glance, this mini stands out from the others in a very striking fashion. Like, the color scheme is fairly, I'm not going to say standard, but like, it's blue and white, and then his alien bits are tan and red. But it's got a very distinct flavor to it compared to everything else at a glance. It's a little more desaturated. I didn't really do this for any particular reason. I didn't specifically choose this model to do it on, but it was kind of a spur of the moment decision, and I'm glad I did it because it ends up making the model look really cool. And here is the finished Khimaera Legionnaire. I'm not quite sure if I like the split white and blue, but I really like the idea of this chapter, and I really like the lore I set up for it. I like the idea of, like, Black Shields eager to fight for the Imperium again under a proper united banner, being sabotaged, and now they're pretty much just waiting to die. It's very tragic, and I feel like that fits 40k to a T. Sitting here, I actually remembered why I initially started painting it black, and it's because I wanted the black in the Black Shields to be a little more apparent. I wanted a little more black and maybe some bronze or gold at a glance. But I think if I try this scheme again, I want to do something more akin to that with like a black and a goldish kind of scheme, maybe on one half of the model, and then like a newer kind of chapter heraldry on the other half of the model. Maybe like half black, and then the other half that isn't black is halved again, so it's kind of like a three-sectioned armor. I'm not sure, but either way, I really like my Khimaera Legionnaire. I feel like it's just tragic enough to stand out backstory-wise, and I feel like it plays to my strengths in particular because I do a lot of things with obscure Xenos on this channel, and, you know, I feel like there could be some overlap somewhere along the line. And we have finally come to the end of this video. I cannot tell you guys how glad I am to be here. This was such a fucking workload, dude. Like, it's gonna have to be a very long time, or someone's gonna have to throw a very good amount of money at me to do something like this again. Because this, I made a fucking Lord of the Rings movie, you know, like it's a Lord of the Rings movie. I'm tired. I'm so tired. But regardless of my degrading physical, mental, spiritual state, I want to say thank you again for making it to the end of this video. I want to thank everybody who has made this project possible to some capacity, whether it was on Patreon, Ko-fi, or just being here to watch this video at all. Like, seriously, I cannot express the gratitude I have for my viewers. It's very humbling. Thank you. While every chapter in here may not be exactly something you like, maybe, you know, it might be hit and miss for some people, I hope that somewhere along the line, someone is inspired to either do something with one of these chapters, or maybe it kickstarts their, you know, $1 million idea for their own chapter and helps get the ball rolling there. Maybe, you know, you like this one chapter, but you do it slightly different, or maybe you change the paint job, maybe a little bit of the lore, you know. Just, I hope this inspires you guys in your own ways, for your own armies. Once again, thank you very much for reaching the end of this video here. I'm going to go lay down, take a break, pray, and just try to take it easy until Dragon's Dogma 2 comes out. And next time, it's definitely going to be a shorter video. Maybe something not Space Marine related. I'm a little burnt out there. But to stop myself from rambling in complete circles, thank you, and have a good one.